Before we drift away, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more calming sleep stories. Sweet dreams await. The rain had started earlier in the afternoon, at first a light drizzle that had soon become a steady downpour, washing the forest in a soft, relentless rhythm. Trees swayed under the weight of the storm, their branches creaking like ancient bones, their leaves whispering secrets to one another. The air was thick with the scent of wet earth and pine, and the world seemed muted as if the storm had swallowed the sounds of life itself. You and your companions trudged along the narrow path, your boots sinking into the damp ground with every step. The forest was dense, shadows playing tricks on your eyes. Each turn in the path revealed a deeper, darker part of the woods, where the light from the setting sun was already fighting to break through the thick canopy overhead. A flicker of firelight broke the monotony of the gray, and soon the trees began to thin. Before you, nestled in a small clearing, stood an old lodge. The wooden structure, though weathered and worn, still held a certain charm. Its walls were blackened by time, the roof sagging slightly in places, but the warm glow from inside suggested life. Perhaps it was a mirage, a flicker of hope in a storm that seemed to stretch on forever. "Let's take shelter for the night," one of your companions said, the urgency in their voice pushing you toward the safety of the lodge. You made your way up to the door, its wood cracked and warped by the years, yet it still opened with a groan. Inside, the fire crackled, the hearth alive with flickering orange and yellow flames. The warmth was immediate, the heavy air of the storm outside evaporating as you stepped in. The lodge was cozy though rustic. Old furniture sat in corners, draped with thick layers of dust, and the walls were adorned with strange paintings that seemed to watch you as you moved. But it was a safe haven, and that was enough for now. "Let's get a fire going," another voice suggested, and soon you were gathered around the hearth. The wind howled outside, and the rain pattered against the roof, a steady drumming that created an almost hypnotic rhythm. You listened to it, the sound a constant backdrop to your murmurs and laughter, as the fire crackled and danced. But the fire wasn't the only thing flickering in the lodge. From the corner of your eye, you caught a shadow moving near the windows, a figure just out of reach, hidden behind the thick glass. It was fleeting, vanishing as quickly as it appeared, but it left a cold ripple in the air that no warmth could chase away. "Did anyone else see that?" you asked, your voice barely above a whisper. Your companions exchanged glances, their faces lit by the fire's glow, but no one answered. The silence that followed was almost as unnerving as the storm itself. It was a strange kind of quiet, thick with something unspoken, like the forest outside had bled into the lodge, bringing its secrets with it. One by one, your companions settled into the worn chairs and sofas, but you couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The fire crackled, but it didn't provide the comfort it once did. The shadows in the corners seemed darker, the wind outside louder, as if the forest itself was pressing in closer, watching, waiting. The longer you sat there, the more the sense of unease grew. Every so often, you thought you heard footsteps in the distance, muffled by the rain but unmistakable. But when you looked, the clearing outside was empty, the trees still, and the path that led into the forest swallowed by the mist. You shook your head, trying to rid yourself of the feeling that you weren't alone here, that something was lurking just beyond the reach of the firelight, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. As the hours passed, the storm showed no signs of letting up. The fire flickered low, casting long shadows across the walls. You and your companions huddled closer to the warmth, but the unease lingered, an almost palpable presence in the air. Every creak of the lodge seemed amplified in the stillness, every gust of wind a whisper that didn't quite belong to the storm. Then the door to the lodge suddenly slammed shut, a loud bang that rattled the windows and sent a shiver down your spine. The temperature dropped, and the fire seemed to flicker, its warmth fading for a brief, chilling moment. "That wasn't the wind," someone murmured, the tension in their voice unmistakable. You all exchanged nervous glances. The storm raged outside, but inside, the lodge felt smaller, more confined, as if the forest had reached out to wrap its fingers around the cabin. The fire crackled again, a comforting sound, but as you stared into the dancing flames, you couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching you, something that had been waiting for the storm to bring you here. The fire's warmth struggled to push back the creeping chill that had settled over the room. The logs cracked and popped in the hearth, but the comfort they offered was fleeting. You couldn't shake the sense that something was off, that the very air had shifted since you first entered the lodge. The shadows in the corners seemed to stretch further, inching toward you, curling in ways that didn't quite match the flickering of the fire. You glanced at your companions, all of them staring into the flames or absently shifting their positions, as if avoiding the growing tension in the air. No one spoke. No one moved. Then, just as the silence became unbearable, the wind outside howled again, louder than before. The rain lashed at the windows, tapping against the glass with an almost rhythmic insistence. But it wasn't just the storm that caught your attention. There was something else, a faint sound beneath the wind and rain. A soft, scraping noise, like nails against wood just beyond the walls. The sound sent a cold shiver down your spine. You turned, looking toward the door, but it was still shut, the shadows pressing against the wooden frame. Your heart quickened as you strained to listen. The scraping noise persisted, but now it had a rhythm to it, like something was walking slowly around the outside of the lodge, circling. "Did you hear that?" one of your companions whispered, her voice barely audible over the storm. Everyone stopped, frozen in place, listening intently. The scraping continued for several moments, followed by a low, guttural growl that seemed to come from the very ground beneath you. It was a noise that made your skin crawl, an unnatural sound like something not meant for human ears. The silence after was deafening. No one moved. No one spoke. The air in the room grew heavier, thicker, and the fire seemed to dim, as if it too were unsure about what was happening around it. "You should check it out," someone finally said, but their voice was shaky, unsure. "Make sure it's just the storm." You wanted to speak, to reassure them, but the words stuck in your throat. You felt it too, the tension, the sense that something was wrong. Something more than the storm. Slowly, one of your companions stood and made their way toward the door, every step measured as if they were walking through a dream. The rest of you remained still, not daring to move or speak. The scrape of their boots on the wooden floor was the only sound that broke the stillness, and it echoed far too loudly in the empty space. Reaching the door, your companion hesitated, their hand hovering over the handle. The scrape outside had stopped, and the wind seemed to die down for a brief moment. In the eerie calm, you could hear the pounding of your own heart, beating in sync with the rain's steady rhythm. Then, without warning, the door swung open with a loud, ominous creak. Cold air flooded in, and for a moment the world outside seemed to rush in with it, the smell of damp earth, the sound of rain against the trees, and something else. Something deeper, something older. Standing in the doorway, your companion peered out into the night, their face illuminated by the faint glow of the lodge's fire. The storm obscured the view, but they could still make out the dark outline of the trees, their branches swaying violently in the wind. No figure, no movement, no sign of whatever had been circling the lodge. But there was something else now, an overwhelming sense of dread that clung to the air, seeping into the room, wrapping itself around everyone like a vice. "Nothing out there," your companion said, stepping back inside and closing the door behind them. But there was no relief in their voice, no comfort in their words. Only a growing unease that seemed to settle deeper into the pit of your stomach. You tried to laugh it off, tried to dismiss the fear that had taken root in your mind. It was probably nothing, just the wind, the rain, the forest playing tricks on you. But then, just as you were about to speak, a loud crash sounded from somewhere within the lodge. The noise echoed through the wooden walls, a sharp, violent sound that made everyone jump. "What the hell was that?" someone exclaimed, their voice trembling. The crash had come from deeper inside the lodge, from the hallway that led toward the back rooms, where the light from the fire could no longer reach. Your eyes flicked toward the dark corridor, and for a moment, you thought you saw something moving there, just a flicker, just a shape, vanishing into the shadows. A thick silence hung in the air, broken only by the crackling of the fire and the relentless pounding of the rain. Every footstep, every sound seemed amplified, too loud in the oppressive stillness. Someone reached for the lantern on the nearby table and flicked it on, the soft glow casting long, flickering shadows across the room. The flames from the hearth flickered uneasily as if in response. "We need to check that out," one of your companions finally said, voice edged with fear. "We can't just sit here." Slowly, unwillingly, you all stood. Each of you grabbed a lantern or flashlight, the small beams of light cutting through the shadows like fragile beacons. The hallway beckoned, dark and silent, its end swallowed by the gloom. As you stepped forward, the air grew colder and the walls seemed to close in. Every creak of the floorboards beneath your feet sounded unnaturally loud. The wind outside howled again, but it no longer felt like a storm. It felt like a warning. The hallway stretched out before you, a tunnel of shadow and wood, and with each step, the feeling that something was watching, something waiting, grew stronger. And then, from the deepest part of the lodge came a soft sound, almost like a whisper. It was so faint, so far away that you almost thought you had imagined it. But it came again, clearer this time, and the words it carried were unmistakable. "Leave, now." The voice was low, strained, and as cold as the night itself. It came from everywhere, echoing in the corners of the lodge, curling around you like the wind outside. You froze, your blood turning to ice as the voice whispered again. "Leave, now." The voice lingered in the air, like a chilling fog that refused to dissipate. You froze in place, your heart pounding so loudly that it seemed to drown out all other sounds. For a moment, you wondered if the voice had come from one of your companions, but the fear on their faces made it clear they had heard it too, heard it in the same way you had. The whisper was not just an eerie sound, but a palpable presence that seemed to seep into your bones. Did anyone else hear that?" one of your companions stammered, their voice barely more than a breath. You nodded, your throat too tight to speak. The whisper had come from deep within the lodge, from the very walls themselves, it seemed. It was faint, barely more than a hiss, but it carried a sense of dread so powerful that it felt like the air around you had thickened. There was no doubt in your mind now, the lodge was not just old, it was something else entirely. It had a presence, a dark energy that clung to its every corner, to the very wood of the floors beneath your feet. You could feel it pressing in on you from all sides, a weight that made it harder to breathe with each passing second. The wind outside howled, louder now, as if it were trying to push its way inside. The rain pounded against the windows, and yet, despite the storm's fury, the lodge felt unervingly still. The fire had dimmed once more, and the flickering shadows cast by the lanterns only seemed to make the oppressive silence worse. It felt like someone, was watching from the darkness, waiting for you to make a move. You glanced around at your companions. None of them seemed to know what to do. It was as though everyone was waiting for someone else to take the first step. But no one moved. The fear was suffocating, and the unknown stretched out before you like a chasm too vast to cross. Another crash echoed from the depths of the lodge. It was louder this time, a loud bang that seemed to come from the back rooms, near where the hallway twisted into the unknown. It was followed by a series of low, scraping noises, like claws against wood dragging in slow, deliberate motions. The noise sent a fresh wave of terror through you, making your stomach lurch. "Okay," one of your companions whispered, "we need to get out of here." But even as they spoke, you all knew it was too late. The door, the only way out, was still locked, and it seemed as though the very lodge itself was pressing in, keeping you inside as if it had become a living thing watching, waiting. Someone took a deep breath and stepped forward, lantern in hand. The light wavered as they moved, casting trembling shadows on the walls. You followed, your own lantern lighting the way, but with each step, it felt as though the darkness behind you grew heavier, creeping toward your heels, tugging at your consciousness. The hallway stretched out before you, dark and foreboding, its ends swallowed by shadows that seemed to throb with a life of their own. The air grew colder as you advanced, and the smell of damp earth and wood rotted beneath a layer of something fouler, something that made your stomach churn. The walls were thick with mildew and age, and as you passed, you thought you saw things move in the periphery of your vision, shapes just out of reach, flickering at the edges of the light. But when you turned, nothing was there. You couldn't shake the feeling that the lodge had been watching you since you stepped inside. It wasn't just a building, it felt like something ancient, something alive. The whispers in the walls, the strange sounds, the way the shadows seemed to twist and bend unnaturally, it was as if the lodge itself was a trap, designed to keep you inside, to keep you from leaving. A faint scratching sound echoed from behind a closed door at the far end of the hallway. You paused, your breath catching in your throat. The sound was more distinct now, closer, like something was trying to claw its way through the door. Your heart raced, and without thinking, you stepped forward, your hand shaking as it hovered over the door handle. Suddenly, a low, guttural growl rumbled from the other side, deep and resonant. It wasn't the growl of an animal, it was too human, too unnatural. It was the kind of sound that made your blood run cold, a warning that you were no longer welcome here. It felt like the sound of something hungry, something that had been waiting far too long for this moment. The door rattled again, this time with more force, as if whatever was behind it was desperate to get out. You jerked back, heart pounding in your chest. The others had backed away as well, their faces pale and wide-eyed, their bodies frozen in fear. "Is anyone else hearing this?" one of your companions whispered, voice barely audible. You nodded, but no one spoke again. The air was thick with fear, the silence unbearable. The growl from behind the door continued, now mixed with low, guttural murmurs. Words. You couldn't understand them, but the tone was unmistakable, angry, bitter, and cold. "I don't want to hear it anymore," one of your companions finally said, their voice trembling. "We need to get out." You were about to turn, to make your way back down the hallway, when the door behind you suddenly burst open with a force that rattled the walls. The impact sent a rush of cold air through the hall, and the light from the lanterns flickered violently. And then you saw it. A figure, tall and hunched, stepped into the light. Its skin was pale, almost translucent, stretched tight over bones too large for its frame. Its eyes were wide and hollow, dark pits that seemed to draw you in with an unnatural magnetism. It had the shape of a human, but it was anything but. Its movements were jerky, like a marionette pulled by unseen strings. It took a step forward, and you heard the unmistakable sound of wet, labored breathing, deep and raspy, like something struggling for air after being submerged for too long. The figure let out a low hiss, its mouth curling into a twisted grin. "Leave," it rasped, its voice barely more than a rasping whisper. "Leave this place, while you still can." Every part of you screamed to run, to escape, but the door behind you was now blocked, and the hallway ahead seemed to close in, the darkness too thick to push through. The figure advanced slowly, its every movement jerky and unnatural, dragging its feet along the wooden floor. You were paralyzed, caught in the gaze of those hollow eyes. The whispers of the lodge, the scraping sounds, the growls, it all led to this moment. The figure was part of it. It was the lodge's keeper, or perhaps something much older. And as it neared, the whispers in your mind grew louder, more urgent. Leave now, or never leave at all. The figure loomed closer, its pale, translucent skin gleaming under the dim light of your lantern. With each slow, deliberate step, the temperature in the hallway seemed to drop, the chill seeping deep into your bones. You could feel the weight of its presence pressing in on you, and it wasn't just the figure itself. It was the air, thick with dread, the walls closing in, the oppressive silence that had settled like a thick fog around you and your companions. You wanted to move, to run, but your feet felt as though they were cemented to the floor, trapped by the figure's gaze. The eyes, those dark, hollow pits, were pulling at you, drowning you in their emptiness. They held no warmth, no humanity. Just an ancient, suffocating void that threatened to swallow everything you were. The figure stopped a mere few feet away from you, its head tilting slightly to one side as it studied you. There was something almost curious in its stillness, like it was weighing you, deciding whether to let you pass or perhaps deciding how best to claim you. The rasping breath it took sounded as if it were gasping for air after centuries of suffocating in silence. "Why are you here?" it whispered, its voice low and gravelly like the scraping of rocks against stone. "You should not have come. The forest has claimed you just as it has claimed so many others." Your heart pounded in your chest, each beat like a drum signaling your impending doom. You could feel the blood rushing to your ears, drowning out the sound of the rain, the wind, the crackling fire. All you could hear was the rasp of that voice and the oppressive thrum of your own fear. "We came for shelter," one of your companions managed to say, their voice quivering. "We didn't know." The figure's lips twisted into a cruel smile, stretching too far to be human, revealing teeth that were far too sharp, far too many. Its smile was not one of amusement, but one of recognition, like it knew something you didn't want to know. The figure's gaze never wavered from you, and it took another step forward. The air seemed to grow thicker, as if the very lodge itself were closing in around you. The wind outside howled louder, but the walls of the lodge were no protection. It felt as if the forest beyond was stretching its limbs inside, its tendrils creeping into every crack, every crevice, until the entire place was one with the darkness. "The storm is not natural," the figure rasped. "It is the forest's wrath. It beckons to you, calls you to stay. But it demands a price. It always demands a price." Your companions exchanged nervous glances, the fear in their eyes reflecting your own. The whispering shadows that had danced around you in the corners of the lodge now felt alive, as if they too were waiting, watching. The silence between you and the figure was unbearable, thick with an ancient understanding that none of you fully comprehended. "What do you want from us?" you managed to ask, your voice barely more than a whisper. The figure's smile faded, its expression turning almost mournful, like a creature bound by its own curse. "What it wants is simple. Your presence. Your fear. The forest feeds on it. It grows stronger, richer with each passing soul. The forest will not let you leave, not without a price." "Is there no way to escape?" another voice asked, barely a whisper. The figure tilted its head again, its hollow eyes narrowing slightly, and then for a moment, it seemed to grow larger in the dim light, its silhouette stretching and distorting like something unnatural, something wrong. There was an illusion, or perhaps a dark truth trying to claw its way out of the very air. "There are always ways to escape," it said, its voice now sounding far too deep, as if multiple voices were speaking in unison. "But you must pay the price. The forest does not give without taking." You felt your chest tighten, a sinking feeling settling deep inside you, as if you were standing on the edge of a great precipice and the ground beneath you was about to give way. What price? You asked, barely daring to speak. The figure leaned in close, its breath cold against your skin, sending a shiver down your spine. It was close enough now that you could see the pale, almost translucent veins running beneath its skin, like the veins of a long-dead corpse. Its presence was suffocating, and the more you stood there, the harder it became to breathe. "Your lives are not enough," the figure whispered, the words curling around your mind like smoke. "The forest is hungry for more, much more." Suddenly, the sound of the wind outside picked up again, but it wasn't the howl of the storm. No, this was something else. A distant noise, deep and resonant, like a low growl that vibrated through the very bones of the lodge. It echoed, reverberating through the walls, the floor, and the very air around you. The figure stepped back slightly, its eyes flicking toward the door. It's as if it could sense something even more ancient, something deeper stirring within the forest. Its voice dropped to a hoarse whisper. "The forest awakens." Before anyone could react, the ground beneath you trembled, a deep, ominous rumble that shook the wooden walls of the lodge. The fire flickered violently, casting erratic shadows that danced like figures of darkness. A creaking sound echoed from the depths of the lodge, followed by a sharp, cracking noise, as if the very foundation of the building were starting to split open. You felt the air pressure change, like the atmosphere itself was shifting, preparing for something terrible to come. Suddenly, the figure turned and moved toward the back of the lodge, its long, thin arms reaching out, its form almost a blur as it disappeared into the shadows of the hallway. "Come," it called over its shoulder, its voice now thick with an unearthly power. "The forest's hunger cannot be stopped. You must follow or be consumed." You felt an overwhelming compulsion to obey, an invisible force pulling you toward the unknown, drawing you into the very heart of the lodge where the darkness waited. The growl outside had stopped, but now the walls trembled with something else, something far older, far more terrifying. Your companions moved, though their steps were slow, as if they too were being drawn forward against their will. The shadows in the hallway grew darker, thicker, as if they were closing in on you, swallowing the light, swallowing everything. And then, just as you reached the threshold of the dark hallway, you heard it, the unmistakable sound of something heavy dragging across the floor behind you. It was the sound of something coming for you, something from the deep woods, something that had always been there, waiting. The sound of something dragging against the floor behind you, a slow, deliberate scrape, made your blood run cold. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't the rain. It wasn't even the storm. No, this was something far more sinister, something tangible, something alive. You couldn't tell where it was coming from, but you felt its presence like a dark shadow pressing in from all sides. Your body screamed to turn around, to run, but the pull of the dark hallway ahead was stronger, a force you couldn't resist. Each step you took toward the corridor felt like you were walking deeper into the unknown, deeper into something that had been waiting for centuries. The air grew heavier with each passing second, thick with moisture and the smell of decay. It was as though the very walls of the lodge were suffocating you, pushing you further toward the thing that had come to claim you. The figure, the keeper of the lodge, was moving ahead of you now, its pale form flickering like a ghost in the shadows. Its slow, methodical steps echoed in the silence, each one sounding like a death knell in the hollow stillness. The sound of its breathing, strained and rasping, filled the air, joining the scraping noise that continued to grow louder, as if something was closing in from behind. You had no choice but to follow. The figure turned a corner in the hallway, disappearing from sight, and you heard the faintest sound of something heavy being moved, dragged, perhaps, across the wooden floor. The floor creaked beneath your feet, groaning under the weight of unseen forces. The temperature had dropped so drastically that you could see your breath, a misty cloud in the air before you. You shivered, the cold sinking into your skin, into your very bones. You and your companions huddled together, lanterns shaking in your hands, casting eerie, flickering light against the dark wood of the walls. The farther you moved into the lodge, the darker it became. The once wooden walls, weathered and aged, now seemed like the husks of something ancient, something living. The lodge wasn't just a structure, it was a part of the forest. It was the forest. The distant growl you had heard earlier echoed through the hallways once more, a low, vibrating rumble that seemed to shake the very foundation of the lodge. The trees outside were restless, thrashing violently in the storm, their limbs scratching against the windows like long, bony fingers. It was as if the storm itself had become a part of this cursed place, an entity that fed off the fear, the confusion, and the helplessness that gripped you all. Then, suddenly, the keeper's figure reappeared at the end of the hallway. It had stopped, standing at the threshold of a door so old and weathered it looked like it had never been opened in centuries. It was cracked, its hinges rusted and worn, and it stood as a silent testament to the age of this place. The heart of the lodge, the figure rasped, its hollow eyes glinting with something you couldn't quite place. This is where the forest begins. This is where it feeds. The hairs on the back of your neck stood on end, the cold creeping into your spine. You could feel the weight of the darkness pressing in from all sides, suffocating you, trying to pull you in. The door before you loomed like an ancient sentinel, standing between you and something far more terrifying than the storm outside. The air around it was thick, heavy with the promise of something alive, something waiting. "What's behind that door?" one of your companions asked, their voice barely more than a whisper. They had stopped moving, staring at the door with wide, fearful eyes, as though they could sense what lay beyond it. The keeper's grin widened, its sharp teeth gleaming in the dim light. "You already know," it replied, its voice a low, mocking rasp. "You feel it, don't you? The hunger of the forest." The air grew even colder, and you shuddered as a gust of wind rattled the windows, sending a chill through your very bones. The figure stepped aside, making way for you to approach the door. The scraping sound had stopped, but now the silence was even more suffocating, as if the very air were holding its breath. As you moved forward, you felt the weight of unseen eyes upon you, hundreds, thousands of eyes watching from the shadows, from the corners of the lodge, from the deep, dark woods that stretched far beyond the walls. Every step you took felt like an intrusion into something sacred, something ancient, something beyond comprehension. You reached for the door, your hand trembling as it hovered over the worn handle. The wood was cold, colder than anything you had felt before. It seemed to pulse beneath your touch like it was alive, breathing. With a deep breath, you turned the handle. The door creaked open, its hinges groaning as if they hadn't moved in centuries. The room beyond was bathed in a sickly, greenish light, casting long shadows that seemed to twist and writhe across the floor. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of rot and decay. It felt wrong, like stepping into a place that should never have been disturbed. The room was vast, but the most terrifying part of it was what lay in the center. At first, you thought it was a large stone altar, but as your eyes adjusted to the dim light, you realized with growing horror that it wasn't stone at all. It was flesh. The altar was alive. It pulsed and throbbed like a massive, beating heart, veins stretching across its surface, pumping something dark and viscous through the long, twisted pathways. The surface of it was covered in a thick, black liquid that seemed to ripple and move of its own accord. The very walls of the room seemed to be breathing, as if the entire space was alive, feeding off the storm, feeding off the forest. And then, in the center of the altar, you saw it. The face. It was a human face, or had once been, now twisted and deformed, its eyes wide open and staring directly at you. The face was trapped, frozen in a mask of eternal terror, its mouth open in a silent scream. Its skin was pale, stretched tight over the skull, and the veins running through its face pulsed with a dark, unnatural energy. The eyes, those hollow, lifeless eyes, seemed to follow your every movement, and you could almost hear its silent plea, "Help me." But there was nothing you could do. The keeper's voice echoed in the room, its tone almost reverent, as if it were paying homage to the creature before you. "The heart of the lodge," it whispered, "the beating heart of the forest. This is the price you will pay. To leave, you must offer your soul to the forest, to the heart that feeds it." The figure stepped forward, reaching toward the altar. As it did, the flesh of the altar seemed to ripple, drawing closer to the figure as if it recognized its presence. The keeper closed its eyes, and a low, vibrating hum filled the room, the sound of something ancient, something powerful, waking. "You cannot leave," the keeper said, its voice now echoing through the room, reverberating off the walls. "Not without making a sacrifice." The room began to spin, the air thickening, the darkness closing in. The face in the altar seemed to smile, a twisted, terrible grin that stretched impossibly wide. And suddenly you realized the price was not just the sacrifice of life. It was a sacrifice of your very soul, your essence, your very being. The forest wasn't just hungry, it was starving, and it would not stop until it had claimed you all. The air in the room seemed to shrink, as if the very walls were closing in, pushing against your chest, making it harder to breathe. The thick, pungent smell of decay was almost overwhelming, clinging to your skin, making every breath feel like an inhalation of death itself. The pulsating altar, its grotesque form alive with twisted veins and dark liquid, seemed to take on a life of its own, growing more massive with each passing second. It throbbed, louder now, as if it were calling out to you, beckoning you closer, drawing you into its dark embrace. The figure, the keeper, stood at the altar now, its hands outstretched, as if in communion with the living horror before you. Its eyes, once hollow, now glowed with an otherworldly light, a deep, pulsating green that mirrored the sickly light of the room. The air around it seemed to hum with power, dark and ancient, as if the keeper were one with the forest itself. "Come," the keeper rasped, its voice now a soft, lilting whisper that sent a shiver down your spine. "You must choose. To stay here forever or to give yourself to the forest. To become one with the heart." You felt a coldness, a deep coldness in your very bones. The idea of surrendering yourself to the forest, to the heart, was a thought too terrible to fathom. It was as if the forest itself was breathing inside your chest, like something was trying to reach out from within, clawing at your soul. The weight of the choice was crushing, and yet you knew deep down that there was no easy escape. The forest had already marked you. The storm, the whispers, the growls, they had all led you here. To this moment. To this dark, inevitable end. One of your companions, their face pale and tight with fear, stepped forward, their voice trembling as they spoke. How can we escape? There must be another way." The keeper's lips curled into a sinister grin, the sharpness of its teeth catching the flickering light of the lantern. It took a step toward your companion, its movements slow and deliberate, like a predator toying with its prey. "There is no escape," the keeper said, its voice so cold it sent a shudder through the air. "The forest calls to those who wander too far. It keeps those who are foolish enough to enter. Once you step foot into the woods, you are already its possession. It owns you now." The keeper turned back to the altar, its arms raised high. The pulsing heart of the forest throbbed in rhythm with its movements, as if it were an extension of the keeper itself. The growl you had heard earlier rumbled again, louder now, coming from somewhere deep within the walls of the lodge. The noise reverberated through the stone and wood, vibrating the air itself, and it was joined by a chorus of shrill whispers, thousands of voices, all speaking at once, too many to comprehend. The darkness in the room seemed to deepen, and you realized with a sinking feeling that the walls weren't just closing in physically, they were closing in on your mind as well. The whispers, the growls, the creaks of the floorboards, it was all part of the same terrible presence. The forest was alive, and the lodge, the heart of the forest, was its vessel. And you had become part of that vessel, a cog in the wheel that would never stop turning. "Don't you feel it?" the keeper continued, its voice growing more insistent, more commanding. "The pull of the forest wants you. It calls to you in your sleep, in your waking hours. Every leaf, every branch, every gust of wind, it speaks your name." Another crash echoed from outside the lodge, louder than the last, as if the trees themselves were breaking and cracking under the weight of something massive. The windows trembled with the force of the storm, but it was more than just the wind that caused them to rattle. The very ground beneath you seemed to shift, as if the earth was preparing to swallow the lodge whole, dragging everything into the depths of its hunger. A feeling of vertigo washed over you, and you staggered, your knees buckling slightly. The shadows in the corners of the room seemed to twist, bending and stretching, forming shapes that looked almost human, but not quite. Figures that had no faces, bodies that were too long, too wrong. They seemed to watch you, waiting for something, but what that something was, you couldn't quite place. The lodge was changing, warping around you, its very walls seeming to breathe with an unnatural life. "You belong here," the keeper's voice echoed like a chant. "This is your place. You are part of the forest now. You couldn't stop it. You couldn't resist. The pull of the forest, of the lodge, of the heart. It was too strong. It gnawed at your mind, whispering things you didn't want to hear, showing you images of things you couldn't understand. The trees outside, their twisted branches clawing at the windows, their trunks like dark sentinels watching the lodge. The ground beneath you, alive, pulsing, as if it had a mind of its own. And the face in the altar. It watched you, its hollow eyes filled with despair, its mouth still open in that silent scream. One of your companions, their voice hoarse and desperate, called out again. "What is it? What does the forest want from us?" The keeper's smile widened, and it slowly turned back toward the altar, its eyes glowing brighter now, burning with a sickly green light. "The forest wants everything," it said, its voice vibrating with power. "It wants your fear. It wants your soul. It wants your essence to feed its hunger. And if you do not give it willingly, it will take it." The room grew colder, the temperature dropping so quickly that you could see your breath, misting in the air before you. Your companions huddled together, their faces pale with fear. You could hear the sound of their breathing, quick, shallow, each of them afraid to move, afraid to speak, as if any sound might trigger something worse. The keeper extended its arm again, pointing toward the altar, toward the beating, pulsating heart that seemed to throb in time with the storm. "This is the price," it whispered, its voice like the rustle of dead leaves. "This is what the forest demands. You must feed it. A terrible, gut-wrenching noise echoed from the altar, like the sound of flesh tearing. You couldn't tear your eyes away as the heart seemed to split open, revealing something dark and squirming within. Tendrils, black and glistening, shot out from the center of the altar, snaking toward you, toward your companions. You tried to move, to scream, but your body felt frozen, trapped by the will of the forest. The keeper's grin grew wider. "It's time," it said softly. "Time to give back what was taken. Time to feed the heart." The room seemed to swirl around you, the shadows coming to life, closing in on your mind. You could feel the heartbeat of the forest, its pulsing, thrumming rhythm vibrating in your chest. The darkness was alive, it was in you now, and there was no way out. The room felt as though it were shifting, folding in on itself. The walls trembled, the floor groaning under an invisible weight that pressed down on every living thing within the lodge. You could feel it, the pressure, like 1,000 eyes boring into you, each one pulling at your very soul. The air was thick, and the scent of earth, rot, and something far worse, the scent of hunger, seeped into every corner, wrapping itself around your lungs and making each breath more difficult to take. The altar before you now was not just a thing of flesh, it was alive. The tendrils that had shot out of it twisted and curled like dark serpents, their black, glistening forms reaching toward you with an almost sentient desire. Each pulse of the heart sent ripples through the air, reverberating in your bones, the very foundation of the lodge shaking with the power of it. The keeper's grin grew wider, its eyes glowing brighter now, an unnatural light that illuminated the entire room in a sickly green hue. It was almost as though the keeper was part of the forest itself. Its skin now seemed to have a bark-like texture, veins crisscrossing in patterns that mirrored the roots of the trees outside. It was no longer a creature. It was a manifestation of something far older, far darker. And then it spoke again, its voice not just echoing in the room, but penetrating your very thoughts, like the roots of the forest reaching into your mind. "You feel it, don't you?" the keeper rasped, its voice no longer just a whisper, but a low, droning hum that filled every corner of your mind. "The forest speaks to you now. It calls to you, pulls at you. You are part of it just as it is part of you. The price must be paid." The tendrils, thick and writhing, moved closer, and you instinctively recoiled, your body trembling with fear. Every part of you screamed to flee, but your legs felt like lead. The door, the only way out, was far behind you now, and every step you took in that direction only seemed to push you further into the heart of the nightmare. The whispers had grown louder, no longer just distant murmurs, but voices, thousands of voices overlapping, calling out in a cacophony of dread. "Leave, before it is too late." The words rang in your ears, but they felt distant, impossible to grasp. The keeper's voice drowned them out, its words becoming more insistent. "There is no leaving now. You are here. You belong here." You felt a cold, clammy sensation on your skin as one of the tendrils brushed your arm, its touch like ice, sending a jolt of terror through your spine. The darkness in the room seemed to close in tighter, suffocating, as though the lodge itself were a living entity, breathing, watching. The walls seemed to pulse with the same rhythm as the heart at the center of the altar. The face, the one frozen in eternal terror at the heart of the altar, seemed to be watching you, its mouth open in a silent scream, its eyes pleading with you. You felt a chill deep in your soul as you realized that the face was not merely a trapped soul. It was a warning. The terror it wore on its face was not just fear, it was the realization of what awaited anyone who dared to stay. The forest had taken it, just as it would take you if you didn't escape. "Help me," the face whispered, but the sound was faint, like the last breath of a dying thing. It was barely more than a rustle in the air, but it was enough to send a shiver through your body. "Don't listen to it," the keeper said, its voice like a whip cracking through the air. "The forest takes what it desires, and it desires you. You have already been marked." You looked around, your heart racing, your body shuddering with an overwhelming sense of helplessness. Every exit was closed, every option taken from you. The walls were closing in, the shadows growing thicker, the whispers louder. And then you saw it, the doorway. A flicker of light behind the keeper's form. A way out. It wasn't much, just a sliver of light at the far end of the room, a faint outline that appeared like an illusion. You weren't sure if it was real or just the madness of the moment, but it was the only hope, the only way out. The keeper had turned its attention toward the altar, its focus fixed on the writhing tendrils, leaving you with one precious moment to act. "Run!" you shouted, your voice raw with fear as you darted toward the light. You weren't sure if your companions were right behind you, but you couldn't afford to look. The pull of the forest, the weight of the lodge, was heavy in your chest, suffocating, but you pushed through it, your legs moving almost instinctively. The light grew brighter as you reached it, the tendrils snapping at the air behind you, their dark forms curling and stretching toward your fleeing body. Just as you reached the doorway, something cold and sharp wrapped around your ankle, pulling you to the ground with a sickening jerk. The tendril was thick, its dark, slimy texture wrapping around your leg, dragging you back toward the altar. The air around you was thick with the stench of rot, and the whispers, the voices, grew louder, now all around you, chanting, pleading, demanding. You reached out, fingers grazing the edge of the doorway, but the tendril pulled harder, the pressure in your chest growing, suffocating. The walls of the lodge seemed to close in, the heartbeat of the forest growing louder, faster. The keeper's voice was just behind you now, cold and mocking. "You cannot escape," it whispered. "You belong to the forest. You will always belong to it." A sharp, agonizing pain shot through your chest, and you gasped, your vision blurring. The tendril tightened, its grip suffocating. But then, just as you thought you would be pulled back into the darkness, something shifted. The air seemed to shimmer, to warp, and suddenly you were free. You stumbled forward, your body weak, your breath ragged. The doorway was no longer an illusion. It was real. The light was real. You didn't stop to look back. The forest, the keeper, the altar, they were behind you now, and you had no intention of letting them claim you. With one final, desperate push, you broke through the threshold, and the world outside came rushing back into focus. The storm was still raging, the trees howling in the wind, but the lodge, the heart of the forest, was behind you now. For a moment, you felt the oppressive weight lift, the grip of the forest loosening, and you breathed in the cool night air like a man starved for oxygen. But even as you ran, even as you moved further from the lodge, you could feel it, the pull, the call. The forest wasn't done with you. Not yet. The storm howled louder as you stumbled away from the lodge, its rage seemingly intensifying with each step you took. The trees around you groaned in the wind, their branches whipping like skeletal arms, reaching for the sky in silent agony. The darkness of the forest stretched before you, vast and endless, an inky black ocean swallowing all light. Yet even in the suffocating pitch of night, you could feel the eyes of the woods on you, watching, waiting. You had escaped the lodge, but it was clear now, the forest never truly lets go. Your heart pounded, each beat ringing in your ears, as the feeling of the keeper's eyes still clung to you, like a shadow that wouldn't release its grip. You could still hear its voice in your mind, its mocking whispers echoing in the corners of your thoughts, reminding you of the deal, the price. You will never be free. You are the forest now. You have always been. You shuddered at the thought, trying to push it aside as you moved deeper into the forest. The wind whipped at your face, biting and cold, but it wasn't the chill of the storm that unsettled you. There was something worse, something lurking in the air, an unnatural presence that made the hairs on your neck stand on end. The forest was alive. You had felt it in the lodge, seen it in the twisted form of the keeper. But now, out here in the open wilderness, it was something else entirely. The ground beneath your feet shifted, soft and uneven, as if the very earth was alive, breathing with a pulse that echoed through your bones. Each step you took felt like you were wading through a thick fog, the air heavy with the scent of wet leaves and something far more foul, like decay, rot, and death. The forest seemed to close in around you, its trees pressing closer together, their gnarled roots creeping out of the earth like hands reaching for you. Your breath came in sharp gasps, and you forced yourself to keep moving. You couldn't stop. You couldn't rest. The forest would not allow it. You glanced over your shoulder, half expecting to see the twisted figure of the keeper following you, its gaunt form shuffling between the trees, but there was nothing, just the dark, oppressive silence of the woods. But the feeling, the presence never left. It lingered in the air, in the trees, in the shadows. You weren't alone. You could never be alone here again. The rustling of leaves, like whispers, carried on the wind. Strange sounds, too rhythmic, too precise to be animals, came from the darkness around you. The forest was listening. It knew you were here, and it would not rest until it had you back. The hunger was not satisfied. The path ahead seemed to disappear, swallowed by the trees, the ground sinking and shifting beneath your feet, the foliage growing denser with every step. It was as if the forest itself had come alive, twisting the land to trap you, to pull you deeper into its grasp. The trees seemed to close in, their trunks too thick to push through, their branches hanging low like twisted fingers trying to catch you. Then you heard it. A low, guttural growl echoed from the darkness ahead. It was distant at first, like an animal in the depths of the woods, but it grew louder, closer. The hairs on your arms stood on end, and instinctively you froze, straining to listen. It was not the growl of a wolf, nor the sound of any animal you knew. No, this was something different, something darker. It was the forest itself, hungry for your fear, hungry for your soul. A rustling came from your right, something large moving through the underbrush. The wind shifted, carrying with it the unmistakable stench of decay. And then the shadows around you shifted. The darkness itself seemed to pulse and move. The trees, no longer static, seemed to sway with intention, their trunks twisting unnaturally as though reaching for you. You swallowed hard, panic rising in your chest. This wasn't just the forest, it was something far older, far darker. The keeper had warned you, but you hadn't understood until now. The forest wasn't just a collection of trees and soil. It was alive, ancient, and cruel. And it wanted you. The growl came again, closer now. It rumbled through the earth beneath your feet, vibrating in your chest, shaking the very ground. A shape appeared between the trees, too large to be natural. A figure, dark and hulking, emerged from the shadows, moving with unnatural grace. Its eyes gleamed with a sickly yellow light, and its mouth opened wide in a twisted, grotesque snarl, revealing rows of sharp, jagged teeth. It was something between beast and man, its body thick and sinewy, covered in dark fur, its skin mottled and scarred, its face a grotesque mockery of human features. The creature was like nothing you had ever seen. And as it stepped forward, the trees seemed to part as if they were making way for it. It was the forest's hunting beast. Its low growl grew louder as it approached, its feet crushing the leaves and branches beneath it. The forest, with all its dark power, was guiding the creature toward you, its force as inevitable as the rising tide. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. A cold sweat broke out across your skin, your heart hammering in your chest. You stumbled backward, your eyes darting around for any sign of escape, but all you saw were the shifting shadows of the trees, closing in around you. The growl came again, closer now, too close. And then the creature lunged, a blur of movement too fast to track. You barely had time to react. The first strike caught you across the chest, knocking the wind from your lungs, sending you tumbling backward into the dirt. Pain exploded through your body, your breath coming in ragged gasps as the creature's hot, foul breath washed over you. Its claws, sharp, blackened talons, raked across your skin, tearing through clothing and flesh with sickening ease. Desperation surged through you, and you scrambled backward, pushing yourself to your feet, your legs shaky, your heart racing. But the beast was relentless, its dark eyes locked onto you as it stalked forward, its growl vibrating through the earth beneath you. The forest was closing in. The trees around you seemed to whisper, urging the creature on, feeding it with your fear. You reached for anything that could protect you, but all you found was the earth beneath your fingers, cold and unforgiving. The beast took another step, its claws scraping against the bark of the trees, and then it pounced. But just as it reached you, there was a sudden sharp crack in the air, like a thunderclap that split the forest in two. The creature paused, its ears twitching, its body stiffening in confusion. You saw the briefest flicker of light in the distance, something different, something unnatural. A pale, flickering light moving fast between the trees. And then, as if in answer to the forest's call, the ground shook again, but this time, it wasn't just the creature. A new presence had entered the fray. You didn't have time to think. You turned and ran. The ground beneath your feet trembled once more, the very earth shaking as if it were alive. Every step felt like you were running through molasses, the air thick and suffocating, each breath coming in short, desperate gasps. The creature, its growl still echoing in your ears, paused for a moment, distracted by the flickering light in the distance. But you didn't dare slow down. You couldn't. The darkness, the forest, and the ancient terror that had awoken all surrounded you, pulling you in every direction at once. The pale light ahead pulsed, casting eerie shadows between the trees. It was faint, almost ghostly, but unmistakably present. It wasn't the creature. It wasn't the forest. This was something different. Something not bound by the same laws that governed the land. You didn't understand what it was, but your instincts screamed that this was your only chance. You pushed yourself harder, your legs burning, your breath ragged and painful. You barely noticed the thorns and roots clawing at your skin, the jagged rocks digging into your feet. The forest had a way of shifting beneath you, making the path more treacherous, more disorienting. But still, the light, faint but persistent, pulled you forward. The growl behind you grew louder again, more insistent as the creature followed. But now it was no longer alone. From the shadows of the trees, other shapes emerged, twisted, grotesque beings, tall and hunched with gnarled limbs, their glowing eyes fixed on you. They were part of the forest. They were the forest. Each one moved with silent grace, their movements unnatural and fluid. They stalked behind you, their whispers rising in the wind like a chorus of lost souls. You knew they were closing in. You could feel them. Feel their presence. The forest was suffocating you, its breath coming in time with your own. The trees themselves seemed to lean closer, their dark branches like claws reaching down, eager to drag you back. And still the pale light pulsed ahead. You broke through a thicket of thick, wet brambles, tearing your clothes and skin in the process, but the sting of pain was nothing compared to the burning in your chest. The need to escape was stronger than anything you had ever felt before. You were driven by something primal, survival. You had to reach the light. It was the only thing that could save you. Finally, you broke into a small clearing. In the center, surrounded by the twisted shadows of ancient trees, was a stone circle. The light you had followed was now blinding, so bright it almost hurt to look at. It flickered like a flame, but there was no fire. There was something impossibly alive about it, a presence that seemed to hum with ancient power. At the center of the circle stood a figure. It was tall, cloaked in a pale, flowing robe that shimmered with an otherworldly glow. Its face was obscured by a hood, but its hands were raised, palms outstretched toward you. The energy emanating from it was intoxicating, like a cool breeze against your skin, like the first breath of air after suffocating in a locked room. The light pulsed in time with your heartbeat, as if it were connected to you, drawing you closer, beckoning you. The forest's growl erupted once more, and you felt the creature's presence draw nearer. Its feet cracked the earth beneath it as it advanced, but as the figure in the stone circle raised its hands higher, the growls of the creatures outside seemed to falter. For a brief moment, they hesitated, as though something had stopped them in their tracks. The very air around you seemed to shift, the wind picking up and swirling in a vortex of energy. You took a tentative step forward, your feet heavy and reluctant, but you couldn't stop now. The figure, still hidden beneath its hood, began to speak, its voice like a soft, melodic chant that drifted on the wind. "The forest has called to you," it said, its voice distant yet intimate, echoing through your very soul. "It has claimed you as it has claimed so many before you." You didn't answer. You couldn't find the words to speak. The presence of the figure was overwhelming, and as you approached the stone circle, a strange, comforting peace began to settle over you. The fear that had gripped your heart since you entered the forest began to ebb away, replaced by something else. Something ancient. Something true. "But there is another path," the figure continued, its voice calm and knowing. "One that does not bind you to the forest's hunger. One that can free you from the heart of the lodge, from the grip of the keeper." The creature's growl intensified, louder now, shaking the earth beneath you as it emerged from the trees. Its glowing yellow eyes locked onto you, its form a dark mass of muscle and fury. It was nearly upon you, but the figure's presence seemed to hold the beast at bay. The forest creatures hovered at the edges of the clearing, watching, waiting. You took another step toward the figure, your body moving almost against your will, as if the air itself was guiding you. The stone beneath your feet felt cold, like ice, but somehow it soothed you. You had reached the center of the stone circle. The figure's hands lowered and the light dimmed, but the sense of calm remained, thick and all-encompassing. "There is a choice," the figure said, its tone shifting, turning more somber. "You may return to the forest, to the lodge, to the keeper and the heart, where you will become part of the land, of the darkness, of the eternal hunger that will never cease. You will feed it. You will serve it. You will be swallowed whole." The growl of the creature outside grew louder, but now there was something else, something new, a feeling of power, of balance, of choice growing within you. The keeper's presence, the forest's whispers, the dread that had clung to you, they all began to recede, as if the very fabric of the forest was shifting around you. "Or," the figure continued, its voice trailing off as if it were weighing something monumental, "you may choose freedom. But to be free of the forest, of its hunger, comes with a price as well." Your heart pounded in your chest and you looked behind you. The creature was standing at the edge of the clearing, its enormous form blocking the trees. Its eyes glowed with fury, its claws raking the ground, but it did not advance. It seemed frozen in place, as if caught in some unseen force. The figure spoke again, its voice steady, yet filled with an almost imperceptible sadness. "The price is this: you will never return to this world. You will leave this place, and never again will the forest call to you. But you will never be truly free. The forest's hunger will always whisper in your mind, will always claw at your thoughts. You will be bound to the memory of this place forever." The choice hung in the air between you like a sword, sharp and cold. Escape? Or something darker, something that might keep you connected to this world forever? The ground beneath your feet began to shake again, and you knew the creature was ready to pounce. The moment had arrived. The figure stepped back, its hooded face revealing no emotion, only the quiet, intense energy of an ancient force. The glow of the stone circle intensified, bathing you in its light. The price was clear. The choice was yours. The figure stood before you, cloaked in its otherworldly glow, the air around it thick with ancient power. The stone circle beneath your feet hummed with an energy you couldn't begin to understand, yet you felt its pulse deep within your chest, as if it were drawing something from you. The choice the figure had presented hung heavy in the air like an invisible weight. Behind you, the growl of the creature, a monstrous thing birthed from the hunger of the forest, rumbled through the earth, its yellow eyes glowing brighter with each passing moment. You could feel its gaze on you, an unyielding, predatory stare that burned into your skin. The forest, though still and silent, felt alive, like 1,000 invisible eyes watching, waiting for your decision. The figure's voice cut through the thickening tension once more, like a bell tolling in the silence of the night. Freedom is not without its costs, it intoned softly. It is a path of great sacrifice. To leave the forest, to break free from its eternal hunger, you must leave behind everything that binds you to this world. The forest will never forget. It will always remember. You felt the weight of its words sink deep into your soul. The forest's hunger had claimed so many before you, and now it had claimed you. The keeper, the heart, the creatures, everything that had haunted you since you entered the lodge, was a part of it, a part of the hunger. Yet the idea of returning, of becoming part of it, of serving the darkness that was so insatiable, felt like an unbearable weight in your chest. But could you truly live in a world where you would always hear the whispers of the forest? Where its hunger would never let go, gnawing at your mind, clawing at your soul? A sudden, cold gust of wind swept through the clearing, the trees around you groaning in the storm's wake. The creature, still waiting at the edge of the circle, began to move again. Its massive form stepped forward, the ground beneath it cracking as if the very earth was being torn apart. Its claws dug into the soil, its breath a heavy, oppressive sound. The figure raised a hand, the light from the stone circle pulsing in time with its movements. The creature stopped, its eyes narrowing with frustration, but it dared not step closer. The air itself seemed to hold it back, a barrier of power and ancient energy that pulsed between you and the forest monster. The choice must be made now, the figure said, its voice softer now, but filled with an unspoken urgency. Once you make it, there is no turning back. You will leave this place, but the forest will remain with you, forever. The creature's growl reverberated through the air, a low and rumbling sound that threatened to swallow the world around you. You could feel the forest pressing in, its hunger so palpable now, as though the trees themselves were closing in, their gnarled roots stretching toward you, wrapping themselves around your feet, your soul. Wanted you back. You turned your gaze back to the figure in the stone circle, the light now brighter, almost blinding. The glow from the stones illuminated the figure's face, revealing a pair of ancient, glowing eyes. They held no malice, no pity, only understanding. The figure knew the cost of freedom. It knew the weight of the decision. The hunger of the forest had always been insatiable, and now it wanted you to join it. But was the freedom the figure offered worth the price? Could you live with the memory of the lodge, the whispers, the hunger forever gnawing at the edges of your mind? The alternative was to give yourself to the forest, to serve it, to feed its eternal hunger and become one of its twisted guardians. Choose, the figure said, its voice no longer echoing but felt deep in your soul. The forest will never release its hold on you, but you can choose to leave it, or remain. The world seemed to slow down around you. The growl of the creature faded into a distant rumble, and the pressure in your chest seemed to lift, if only slightly. It was as if time itself had paused, waiting for you to make the inevitable choice. You glanced back once more at the beast. Its eyes were locked onto yours, but there was something different in them now. The hunger hadn't subsided. No, it intensified. It was like a force of nature, ancient, relentless, and overwhelming. Wanted you. The wind howled louder, the trees shaking, the branches reaching toward the sky in a twisted ballet of darkness. It was no longer just the forest, it was the heart of it. The keeper, the altar, the hunger, they were all connected. The lodge was a part of this. The beasts, the spirits, they were all part of this. And you were part of it too. You closed your eyes, taking a deep breath. You didn't know what awaited you on the other side of this choice. The idea of leaving the forest, of cutting yourself off from its insidious grasp, was a tempting one. But could you bear the thought of the forest always whispering, always calling to you? Could you live with the knowledge that the hunger would never truly go away? Your pulse quickened as the creature took another step forward, its massive form looming over you like a predator ready to strike. The light from the stone circle flickered, the air growing colder as the choice became clearer. There was only one way out, but it came with a price you didn't fully understand. You cannot remain, the figure said, its voice now deep, resonating through the stones. You will either become part of the forest or you will leave it behind. But the cost will never leave you. With every word, the pressure mounted. Your body felt heavy, your mind clouded with uncertainty. Could you live with the price of freedom? Could you turn your back on the forest, leave behind the hunger, the whispers, and the creature that pursued you but never truly escape its grip? You turned your gaze back to the creature, its eyes glowing, its claws flexing in anticipation. The forest was watching, waiting. And you realized, as the wind howled louder and the figure's light intensified, that the forest had never been something outside of you. It was within you, woven into your very soul. The hunger was a part of who you had become. The choice was yours. The weight of the choice pressed down on you, as heavy and unyielding as the oppressive darkness that surrounded you. The creature, its eyes blazing like twin suns, stepped forward again, its massive frame casting an ominous shadow across the stone circle. Its growl was low and guttural, like the rumbling of distant thunder, vibrating the very earth beneath your feet. But in the midst of this, the light from the stone circle pulsed brighter, almost as if it were reacting to the presence of the beast, holding it at bay. The air was thick with anticipation, the very forest holding its breath, waiting for your decision. The whispers of the trees, once muffled, grew louder, like the faint rustle of dead leaves carried on the wind. It was as if the entire forest were speaking to you, offering its voice as a chorus of endless voices, pleading, coaxing, threatening. "Do you hear them?" the figure whispered. Its voice, though soft, cut through the tension like a blade. "They are the voices of the lost, of those who chose to stay. They are the echoes of your future, should you decide to remain." You couldn't look away from the creature. Its eyes were still locked on yours, a predatory gleam in them. The hunger was so palpable, it was suffocating. The creature was not just a beast. It was a manifestation of the forest's insatiable need, its desire to consume, to take, to keep. And that hunger wasn't just for your flesh, it was for your soul. "Choose," the figure said again, this time louder, its voice imbued with a quiet, ancient authority. "You must choose, and quickly, for the longer you hesitate, the more the forest will claim you." The ground beneath your feet seemed to groan with the weight of that truth. The stone circle, though bathed in light, felt cold now, its energy turning from a warm glow to an icy chill. The air grew denser with every passing second, the scent of damp earth, decay, and something far more unnatural filling your lungs. You had entered this forest by accident, or so you thought. But now you realized it had never been an accident. The forest had been waiting for you, drawing you in, testing you, pulling you into its web. The storm, the rain, the whispers, it had all been part of the same plan, a plan that led you here, to this moment, to this impossible choice. And yet, you couldn't shake the feeling that even now, you weren't entirely free. Even if you chose the path of freedom, even if you turned your back on the forest and the creature before you, something would always remain. An imprint, a scar, a memory. The forest would leave its mark on you, and it would never truly let you go. The figure stepped closer, its robes shifting, glistening in the eerie light. Its face remained hidden beneath the hood, but there was something about its presence that made your skin crawl with both fear and awe. "There is a price for everything," the figure murmured. "For the freedom you seek, for the peace you yearn for. It is not an easy path, but the alternative is far worse. The forest will claim you, not just your body but your soul. You will become one with it. The hunger will consume you, and in time you will forget yourself." You clenched your fists, your mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. You wanted to escape. You wanted to be free of the forest's pull, to leave behind the nightmarish lodge, the keeper, the altar. But how could you be free when the forest's hunger was rooted so deep in your bones? Could you ever really escape? Would you be forever haunted by the memory of this place? And then there was the figure. Its presence was so old, so ancient, that it felt as though it had always been here waiting for you. It wasn't human. It wasn't even alive in the traditional sense. It was something else, something born from the forest's heart, from its very being. The creature snarled again, its jaws snapping shut with a sickening crack. It was getting closer now, the space between it and you closing faster than you could have imagined. The hunger was growing, overwhelming, and in that moment, you realized that the forest was not just a place. It was an experience. It was an ancient force, alive with its own desires, its own needs. And you were caught in its web. But still, the figure in the stone circle stood firm, its hands outstretched, its light glowing brighter than ever. There was no malice in its presence, no darkness. Only truth. The kind of truth that made your very soul ache. "Time is short," the figure said, its voice growing more insistent. What you choose will determine everything. The forest will not wait. You turned to look at the creature once more. It was almost upon you now, its eyes fixed on yours with unblinking intensity. The very ground beneath its massive paws trembled, the earth seeming to buckle under its weight. The hunger was real. It was tangible. And it wanted you. You could feel it, a cold, crawling sensation that started at the base of your spine and spread like ice through your limbs. The creature was so close now that you could see the faint gleam of its saliva, dripping from its gaping maw. Its claws, sharp as knives, scraped the earth with every step it took. Your breath came in shallow gasps, and for a moment, time itself seemed to stretch and bend, as if the universe had paused, waiting for your decision. You could feel the weight of the forest pressing down on you, suffocating you. The light from the stone circle was blinding now, pushing against the darkness that pressed in from every side. But then, with a rush of clarity, you made your choice. You had to leave. You had to break free no matter the cost. You would face the consequences, but you would not become part of the forest. You would not let it claim you. You turned your back on the creature, on the darkness, and ran toward the light, toward the figure. The moment you stepped into the light, everything changed. The forest howled in protest, the ground beneath your feet shaking violently, as if the very earth were tearing itself apart to keep you from leaving. The creature's roar echoed through the trees, but it no longer mattered. The light enveloped you completely, and as it did, you felt the forest's grip on you loosen, its hunger faltering. The whispers, the growls, the sense of dread, they all faded into the background, growing weaker and weaker with every step you took toward the light. The figure's voice rang out one final time, a soft whisper in your mind. You have chosen. The world around you seemed to twist and shimmer, and then with a final flash of light, the forest disappeared. The creature's growls faded into silence, the wind's howl turning to a whisper. The cold, the hunger, the terror, they were gone. And in their place there was only darkness. But it wasn't the darkness of the forest. It was the darkness of freedom. The darkness that enveloped you was different now. It wasn't the suffocating, oppressive blackness of the forest, nor the suffused shadow of the lodge that had haunted your every step. No, this was a different kind of dark. It was still, quiet, a vast, infinite space where sound and time seemed irrelevant. A place of stillness, as though the entire world had ceased to exist for a moment. You couldn't tell how much time had passed since you had stepped into the light, since you had made the choice to leave the forest behind. Was it minutes? Hours? Days? Or had it all happened in the blink of an eye? There was no way of knowing. Everything had become timeless, suspended in this strange void between worlds. The air felt different, almost weightless, and as you stood in the inky blackness, you realized that your body no longer felt the weight of the earth. You were unmoored, floating, yet standing. For a brief moment, there was peace. The weight in your chest had lifted, the gnawing hunger, the sense of being watched. It was all gone. It was as if the forest, the lodge, the creatures, and the keeper had been erased from your memory, as if they had never been. There was no more rain, no more cold, no more fear. Only a silence so profound it was almost soothing. But then a shiver ran through you. Something stirred in the blackness. The peaceful stillness was broken by a faint sound. Whispers, not the wind's eerie mutterings or the creature's growls, but a different kind of whisper. It was the soft murmur of voices, distant but unmistakable. They came from all around you, filling the space with their words, their tones familiar, yet utterly foreign. You tried to focus, to make sense of the voices, but they were impossible to understand. They seemed to be speaking in a language you couldn't grasp. Symbols, thoughts, fragmented echoes from another place. But you felt them inside you. They weren't coming from anywhere around you. They were in your mind. The voices seemed to be weaving together your thoughts, stirring long-buried memories, emotions, and desires. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. You have chosen, but what will you leave behind? A cold sensation crept down your spine as the whispers seemed to shift, becoming something darker, more tangible. The blackness around you began to warp and twist, as though the very fabric of reality was bending. Figures, shadows, began to emerge from the void. They were tall, thin, indistinct, like faded specters, their forms barely perceptible, but there. You could sense them more than see them. Figures that shifted and coiled, growing and shrinking with each breath you took. You cannot leave without cost. You belong to the forest now. You will never forget. A figure stepped closer to you, its shape no more than a faint outline in the darkness, yet you felt its presence all the same. It was the figure from the stone circle, the one who had offered you freedom. Its face was still hidden beneath the hood, but now, in this strange realm, you could sense the depth of its gaze. There was something benevolent in it, but it was paired with a sorrow that pierced through you. Your choice was made, but that choice binds you forever, the figure said, its voice reverberating in your chest like a distant drumbeat. The forest cannot be outrun. It is not simply a place, but a force. It lives within you now. You felt it then, the tug. Not physical, but internal. The sensation that something had shifted inside you. A thread of connection, invisible but undeniable, pulling at the core of your being. The forest's roots, its tendrils, had wormed their way into your very soul, and now they were not letting go. The figure stepped forward, and though you could not see its face, its energy seemed to envelop you. Freedom from the forest is a rare gift, it said, its tone both comforting and sorrowful. But the forest is never truly left. You carry it with you now in ways you cannot yet understand. It will shape you, shape your thoughts, your actions. It will haunt your dreams. What would you do when the hunger comes again? The thought hit you like a sudden wave crashing against your chest. It was as if the question came not from the figure but from the forest itself. Something older, darker, pulsing beneath the earth, beneath your skin. The hunger was not just the desire to feed, to consume. There was something more primal. Something tied to the earth, to the cycle of life and death that stretched back beyond memory. It was a force of nature itself, and now it was part of you. Will you be its vessel? The figure asked, its voice soft but carrying an ancient weight. Or will you reject it and become something more? The question echoed in your mind, swirling like a storm. You could reject the hunger, could push it down, lock it away, pretend it wasn't there. But the feeling that had settled into your bones, the connection to the forest, would never fade. It would always be with you. The whispers, the cold pull of its insatiable need, would haunt you, follow you wherever you went. You had escaped, but had you truly left? The figure in the darkness stepped closer still, its presence growing stronger. You will always feel it. The forest will never release you. The hunger will never leave. But you are not alone. There is a path ahead, one you have not yet seen, one where the darkness you carry can be shaped, can be used not as a curse, but as a tool. The shadows around you seem to swirl and shift, pulling back, revealing the faintest shimmer of light in the distance. It was not the blinding light of the stone circle, but a pale, soft glow, like the first light of dawn breaking through a heavy fog. It beckoned, gentle yet persistent. And in that moment you realized the truth. This was not the end. The darkness around you was not an end at all. It was a beginning. The whispers, the shadows, the hunger within you, they were all pieces of something greater, something you had yet to understand. The forest had claimed you, yes, but it had also given you something else. A gift, a curse, or perhaps both. What happens now? You asked, the words leaving your lips before you could stop them. Your voice sounded foreign here, as though you were speaking from a great distance. The figure, still shrouded in darkness, raised its hands slowly as if in answer to your question. You will walk the path ahead, carrying both the light and the darkness. The hunger will follow, but so will the strength to fight it. The forest may never release you completely, but you will shape your fate. The glow in the distance grew brighter, more defined, pulling at you with an energy that felt both like home and like something new, something unknown. The figure slowly stepped back, its form dissipating into the shadows, its voice lingering in your mind. The forest will never forget you, but you can choose what you become. And as the light pulled you forward, you felt a strange sense of calm settle over you. The whispers of the forest, the hunger, the weight of everything that had passed, it all began to fade, becoming less urgent. You didn't know what lay ahead, but for the first time in what felt like forever, you didn't feel trapped. You had made your choice. And now you would find out what it meant to live with it. The light grew stronger, its ethereal glow cutting through the thick, suffocating blackness. The whispers faded, as if the forest itself was retreating into the distance, leaving behind only the faintest echoes of its hunger. The cold sensation that had wrapped itself around your spine seemed to loosen, but the weight of what you had chosen, what you had become, remained. As the glow intensified, you began to move toward it, drawn inexplicably forward. It wasn't a walk so much as a gentle pull, like a force outside of you guiding your every step. Your feet felt light, almost as if they were barely touching the ground, and with each step, the darkness around you seemed to recede further, the oppressive weight lifting, if only slightly. But there was a strange sensation that accompanied the growing light, a feeling that you were passing through something intangible but very real. It was like stepping through the veil between worlds, and though the air around you had lightened, you couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching. The hunger, the forest, the creatures, it wasn't gone. It wasn't finished. It was just waiting for you to falter. As you moved forward, the light ahead began to take shape, solidifying into a faint but defined path. It stretched out before you, winding through what looked like a vast, empty expanse, an endless space like a world suspended between time. There was no sky above, no ground below, only a dark expanse that seemed to stretch into infinity. The air was still, heavy with the scent of something ancient, yet there was an undeniable clarity here. The path, though uncertain, seemed to promise something beyond the forest, beyond the hunger, beyond the darkness. You took another step. The forest's whispering had dulled to a faint murmur in the back of your mind, like the soft rustle of dead leaves on a windless night. But it was there, always there, lurking in the background. You felt the presence of the creatures, those that had once hunted you, watching from the edges of your consciousness. They had been a part of you for so long. Could they truly be gone? The path before you was made of soft, glowing stones, faintly luminescent as though they were alive. They pulsed gently with a light that was not harsh, but soothing like the glow of a distant star. It wasn't warm exactly, but it wasn't cold either. It was neutral. In this place, the light had no warmth, no heat, and no burn. It was simply a presence, gentle yet strong. As you walked, the path twisted, winding through a forest of soft, shadowed trees that bent and swayed in the distance. Their trunks were white, smooth like marble, their branches reaching out like fingers tracing patterns in the air. There were no leaves, no foliage, only the ethereal outlines of their forms, stretching toward the faint light ahead. It felt like a forest, but not the one you had escaped. This was something else, a place that existed beyond time, beyond the grasp of the forest that had once held you captive. And then, as you walked further down the path, you saw something ahead of you, a figure. It was tall, almost shadow-like, standing perfectly still. The figure was draped in a cloak, its face obscured, and yet there was an undeniable sense of recognition. You didn't know who or what it was, but there was something about it that tugged at you. Something familiar. You hesitated. The figure didn't move, but you could feel its presence, as though it were waiting for you to approach. As you took another step forward, the air seemed to shimmer, and the world around you bent in strange, quiet ways. Time seemed to slow down, and for a moment, everything felt perfectly still. You could feel the pull of the figure, the way it beckoned you, though there was no gesture, no movement to indicate this. It was simply a presence, more real than anything else in this space. The forest is a part of you now. The thought came unbidden, like a whisper in your mind. You felt it then, the unmistakable truth of it. The hunger was inside you. The forest was in your veins, in your pulse, in the very air you breathed. You could feel the tendrils of it still, faintly, tugging at your consciousness, like an invisible thread pulling at your soul. But here in this place, the hunger was not a force. It was not something that could control you. It was simply a part of who you had become. It was a memory, a shadow that followed you, but it would never again rule you. You had made your choice. The figure ahead of you stirred slightly. It wasn't a gesture, not really, but something in the way it seemed to acknowledge you. It took a step forward, its form shifting in and out of the shadows, its presence both imposing and comforting at once. You are here, it seemed to say without words, but you are not yet whole. You stepped closer, your feet now moving of their own accord, pulled by a force you couldn't comprehend. And when you reached the figure, it lowered its hood, revealing a face that was unlike any you had seen before. It wasn't human, not in the way you would have expected. Its features were delicate, almost translucent, like the leaves of a tree caught in the wind. Its eyes were not eyes, but pools of light, glowing softly in the shadow of its face. It had no mouth, but you could hear its voice in your mind, clearer than any words spoken aloud. "You have crossed the threshold," it said, its voice resonating deep within your chest as though it came from the earth itself. "But your journey is far from over. You are no longer bound to the forest, but you are still bound." The figure's words echoed in your mind, but you understood their meaning immediately. Bound. The forest's hunger was a part of you. Its essence had intertwined with your soul, and now, it was an inescapable part of your being. But this figure, this being before you, had not come to judge or condemn. It had come to offer a path, a way forward. A way to live with the forest within you without being consumed by it. "You will never forget the forest," it continued, its voice echoing, soft but full of gravity. "But you will learn to control it, to shape it, to wield its power, its hunger as a tool, not as a curse." You felt a rush of conflicting emotions. The idea of shaping the hunger, using it as a tool. Could you really live with it, control it? Would it always be a part of you, lurking just beneath the surface, waiting for a moment of weakness to strike? You weren't sure, but you knew this. The forest would never release its grip. Not completely. but you could choose how it would shape you. You could learn to control it, to master it in ways you hadn't yet imagined. The figure extended a hand, and though you could not see its expression, you felt its gaze on you, warm, understanding, patient. "It is not the forest that makes you what you are," it said, its voice softer now, almost a whisper. "It is your choices. It is how you use the power within you. The darkness you carry will guide you, if you learn to guide it." For a moment, you stood in the shadow of the figure, the path ahead unclear, the hunger within you still pulsing like a quiet, insistent heartbeat. The forest was not gone, and it never would be. But maybe, just maybe, it didn't have to be your enemy. You took a deep breath, and then, slowly, you reached out to accept the figure's hand. You had crossed the threshold. And now, you would begin the journey of understanding what it meant to live with the forest, to walk the path it had set before you. As your fingers brushed against the figures, a sudden surge of energy pulsed through you. It wasn't physical, not in the way the forest's hunger had gnawed at your bones, but more like a wave of understanding, of connection, coursing through your veins. For a brief moment, it was as though the very essence of the forest itself poured into you, a flood of knowledge, power, and ancient truths. You could feel the hunger, the whispers, the roots that twisted through the earth beneath you. You felt it all, a sharp, cold wave of awareness that left your head spinning. But this time it didn't feel oppressive. It didn't feel like a curse. It felt like a part of you, a part you could control, if you were willing to face it. The figure held your gaze, its light-filled eyes unwavering, as if it had been waiting for this moment, waiting for you to finally grasp the truth. "Now you understand," it said softly, its voice resonating with something ancient, something primordial. "The hunger is not your enemy. The forest is not your enemy. You are its guardian, its keeper, its bridge between worlds. But you are more than that too. You have the power to shape what you carry, to decide how you use it." You could feel the weight of the words settling in your chest, the responsibility of them. The path ahead was no longer just a path of survival. It was a path of mastery, of understanding, of forging a relationship with something that had once seemed like a relentless, insatiable force. For the first time since you had entered the forest, you didn't feel alone. The hunger wasn't an external force that would consume you, it was an extension of yourself, a part of your soul. The shadowy figures that once haunted your every step, the growls and the whispers, they were not separate from you. They were reflections of your own fear, your own vulnerability, your own power. The figure in front of you stepped back slowly, its form dissolving into the soft, glowing mist that surrounded you, like smoke rising into the still air. "You will begin your training soon," the voice echoed, though the figure had already disappeared, leaving only the soft glow of the path ahead. "But first, you must understand one thing. Power comes with sacrifice. Every choice you make, every decision will either strengthen you or weaken you. The forest will test you, it will challenge you, and you will either overcome it or it will claim you." The words echoed, vibrating in your chest, in your mind. You stood still for a moment, your thoughts a whirlwind of emotions and realizations. The forest had always been a place of fear for you, a place where you had run, where you had been hunted, where you had feared for your life. But now the forest was a part of you, and you were no longer just a victim. You had the power to stand tall, to control the forces that had once seemed so insurmountable. You took a deep breath, your chest filling with the strange, cool air of this place, and began to move forward once more, the path stretching out before you, illuminated by the soft glow of the stones beneath your feet. The forest of marble trees seemed to shift with each step you took, as if it too was alive, breathing in sync with your movements. The hunger inside you whispered, gentle now, like a far-off echo of a storm. It was still there, but it was no longer overwhelming. It was no longer something you had to flee from. It was something you could manage, something you could use. As you walked, you noticed that the air seemed to grow denser. The space around you, though vast, felt more tangible now, as though the very ground beneath you was responding to your presence. The path twisted and turned, leading you deeper into the stillness, and you couldn't shake the feeling that you were being watched. But this time it didn't feel threatening. It felt observant. Ahead, the soft glow of the stones began to shift in color, deepening to a richer, warmer hue. The temperature of the air grew warmer too, but not uncomfortable. It was as if the very nature of the place was adjusting to your presence. A slow, gentle hum resonated from the stones beneath your feet, and you could feel the energy of the path shifting, becoming more pronounced. You stopped and looked around. The trees, marble, pale and smooth, no longer appeared quite so distant. They seemed to lean in closer, their thin branches curling like hands reaching toward you. Their glowing outlines flickered, their forms hazy, but they were undeniably alive, aware of your presence. The soft hum from the stones beneath you deepened. You could hear it now, like a soft murmur at the edge of your consciousness. The hunger, the ancient power that had once dominated you, was now here in this space, running through everything. But it wasn't a force you had to fear. Not anymore. You took another step and suddenly the world shifted. The path ahead blurred, and for a moment, it felt as though the ground beneath your feet was giving way. A strange, dizzying sensation swept over you, and the soft glow of the stones dimmed, leaving only darkness. But then a new light appeared. It wasn't the soft glow you had seen before. It was sharp, brilliant, like the first rays of dawn breaking through a dark sky. The light surged forward, surrounding you, filling the space with a soft warmth. And as the light enveloped you, the ground beneath you solidified once again. You blinked, and when your eyes opened, the darkness had lifted. Before you stood a new figure, a new presence, taller, more imposing. It was not like the figure you had seen before. This one was clothed in black robes that shimmered like the night sky, and its face was obscured by a dark hood. The figure stood still, its hands clasped before it, waiting. "You have come far," the figure spoke, its voice deep and resonant, carrying the weight of time itself. "But there is more for you to learn. The path ahead is long and there are many trials. The hunger is not just something to be controlled. It is something to be understood. You must learn its nature, learn how to guide it." Your heart skipped a beat. This was the next step, the next challenge. It was clear now that this journey was only beginning. The forest's hunger was no longer a dark shadow. It was a force that you could bend to your will. It was a part of you. But to truly wield it, to understand it, you would have to face the trials that lay ahead. The figure stepped forward, its robes billowing around it like shadows. "If you are to walk this path, you must be prepared to sacrifice. Power requires commitment. You will be tested. And in those tests, you will discover what you are truly made of." The figure raised a hand, and the space around you began to shimmer, as though the very fabric of reality was bending once again. The path stretched forward, twisting into infinity, leading you deeper into the heart of this strange, ethereal world. You stood tall, your heart steady. You knew now that the hunger was not a curse. It was a part of your destiny. The forest's whispers would always echo in your mind, but you would not be consumed by them. You would control them. You would master this power, this force, this hunger that had once been your greatest fear. And with that understanding, you took the first step forward into the unknown, the trials awaiting you in the distance, ready to shape your fate. The forest had not claimed you. You had claimed it. The air grew heavier with each step you took. The figure in black robes watched silently from the edge of the path, its form a blur against the growing light. The ground beneath you hummed softly, its vibrations now more pronounced, like the low rumble of distant thunder. As the path twisted before you, the air thickened with an energy that was both familiar and foreign, like the taste of something bittersweet on the tip of your tongue. The light that had once seemed warm and inviting was now sharp, bright, almost unnerving. It illuminated the path ahead, but it didn't reveal what lay beyond. The trees, still towering and marble-like, seemed to shift with your movements, bending and swaying as though they were alive, reacting to your presence. Their branches twisted in eerie, deliberate patterns, as though they were not simply swaying in the wind, but reaching toward you with intent. You paused for a moment, your breath shallow, unsure whether to continue. The hunger inside you stirred faintly, a pull at the edge of your consciousness, a soft but unrelenting tug that made you keenly aware of its presence. The forest wasn't done with you. It had simply shifted into something else, something quieter but still ever-present. Every step you take brings you closer to what you are meant to become. The figure's voice resonated from behind you, breaking the heavy silence. You are not alone in this. The forest is your ally, but it will test you. The hunger inside you will test you. You turned to face the figure, its shadowy presence stark against the brilliant light that surrounded you. There was no expression on its face, but there was something in the air, a kind of expectation, that weighed down on you, urging you forward. "You will learn to control what lies within," it continued. "But control is a fragile thing. It requires more than just willpower. It requires understanding." A strange chill ran through you, but you didn't flinch. You had come this far. The hunger inside you had become a part of your soul, but it didn't need to define you. You could learn, could grow, could harness its power. You had to. The figure's presence seemed to dissipate into the shadows as the path stretched onward. A deep breath passed your lips as you stepped forward again, the stones beneath you pulsing as though they too recognized your resolve. As you moved, the light shifted again, becoming softer, more diffused. It wasn't the sharp, glaring light of before, but a gentle, warm glow that wrapped around you like a cloak. The temperature grew warmer, and you could feel the hum of energy intensifying beneath your feet. The path ahead bent to the left, leading deeper into the dense shadows of the marble trees. The air grew heavier, thicker with moisture. You could hear faint whispers again, not the malevolent whispers of the forest you had once feared, but soft murmurs that seemed to beckon you forward. They weren't threatening, they were curious, almost coaxing. Then suddenly the trees parted, revealing an open space, a clearing bathed in a soft, glowing light. The ground here was different. It was smoother, softer, and the air smelled of earth, rich and sweet. At the center of the clearing, a great stone altar stood, ancient and weathered, its surface etched with intricate markings. The stone was not the white, smooth marble of the trees, but dark, jagged, like something forged in the depths of the earth. The altar pulsed with energy as if the very stone was alive, breathing. You felt the hunger stir again, stronger this time, not with the insistent pull of before, but with the deep, primal call of something ancient. The air in the clearing was alive with energy, vibrating with a force you couldn't fully comprehend. And at the base of the altar, in the center of the stone, a dark, obsidian bowl sat, cracked and worn with age. Its surface was slick with something dark and viscous, something that shimmered in the light. It beckoned to you as if it had been waiting for this moment, waiting for you. A voice, faint and distant, echoed through the clearing. It was neither friendly nor threatening, but it felt as though it came from deep within the forest itself, from the very heart of the earth. To control the hunger, to master the forest's power, you must offer what you have come to fear the most. You swallowed hard, stepping closer to the altar, your heart pounding in your chest. The voice seemed to come from everywhere, reverberating in your skull. It wasn't a choice. It was a requirement. The forest demanded something, something from you. The hunger within you stirred violently, a sudden rush of heat surging up through your chest, as if it were reacting to the altar. Your breath hitched in your throat as the shadows around you deepened, the whispers growing louder, becoming more urgent, more demanding. The hunger will consume you if you do not face it. But in this moment it can be tamed. It can be shaped. You stood at the altar now, the dark bowl before you, its surface glistening in the eerie light. The hunger roared inside you, clawing at your insides, begging for release. It wanted this. It needed it. Your hands trembled as you reached toward the bowl, unsure of what you were meant to do. The air seemed to hold its breath, the forest itself waiting for you to make your move. For a moment you hesitated, your mind racing. Was this a test of strength? Of will? Or something else, something more primal? You glanced over your shoulder, but there was no figure in sight, no guide to show you the way. The figure had disappeared, leaving you to face this moment alone. And then it hit you, the realization that you weren't meant to fear the hunger. You weren't meant to shy away from it. You had embraced it, but now you had to master it. You had to face the darkness within yourself. The whispers filled your mind again, but this time they weren't chaotic. They were clear, guiding. Face it. Control it. Let it flow through you, not around you. Let the hunger become your strength. You closed your eyes, drew in a steadying breath, and focused. You had already chosen this path. The forest had tested you before, and it would test you again. But this was the true trial. To face what was inside you, to stand at the altar of your own fears, and to transform them into something greater. With slow, deliberate hands you reached out and touched the bowl. The dark substance within it thrummed with energy, a low, vibrating hum that matched the beat of your heart. The hunger roared inside you, but you didn't recoil. Instead, you pressed your palm into the surface of the bowl. The moment your skin made contact, a surge of energy shot through you, like a bolt of lightning. The hunger exploded within you, but instead of consuming you, it surged outward, wrapping around you like a cloak. The energy flooded your body, spreading through every fiber of your being. For a moment, you were one with the forest. The hunger, the power, the ancient force of the earth, all of it flowed through you, into you. It wasn't chaos. It wasn't overwhelming. It was a force you could understand, a force you could control. And in that moment, you understood. The trial was not to conquer the hunger, it was to embrace it, to guide it. You pulled your hand away from the bowl, and the dark substance slowly began to dissipate, evaporating into the air like smoke. The clearing before you was still, but you could feel the change within you, the power you had harnessed, the connection you had forged. As the final remnants of the energy faded into the air, the path ahead grew clearer. The forest was no longer something to fear. It was something you had become a part of, something you had mastered. You were not its servant, nor its victim. You were its guardian, its equal. The whispers in the air had quieted now, the hunger inside you a steady, rhythmic pulse rather than a raging storm. And as you stepped away from the altar, The path stretched forward once again, illuminated in a way it hadn't been before. This time you were ready. You had passed the first test, and there were many more ahead. The path ahead stretched far and winding, as if the forest itself were a labyrinth with no end in sight. But with each step, the weight that had pressed down on you since your arrival seemed lighter, more manageable. The hunger within you had not been vanquished, but it had been tempered, shaped. It was no longer a predator that gnawed at your mind. It had become a force you could channel, something you could use to guide your path rather than hold you captive. Still, there was no denying the cost of that power. The clearing where the altar stood seemed to ripple as you moved away, fading into a dim, quiet place behind you. The whispers, though faint, still clung to the edges of your thoughts. They were no longer the chaotic, frantic cries of the forest, but soft, subtle suggestions, like the murmur of a distant storm on the horizon. You walked on, the path narrowing slightly, the trees bending in toward you as if they were guiding you forward. Their white, marble-like trunks swayed like giants in the windless air, their branches outstretched as though reaching out to touch you. There was something oddly reassuring about their movements. They were not just part of the forest. They were with you now, as much a part of your soul as the hunger itself. The path before you began to shift, the ground growing uneven. The stones that had once pulsed softly beneath your feet now felt sharper, jagged, as though they were pushing back against your presence. The temperature dropped, the warmth of the clearing fading behind you. The air became thick with moisture, the humidity clinging to your skin like a second layer. But it wasn't just the environment that had changed. You could feel it in the air, a subtle change, a difference in the very fabric of the world around you. The stillness had deepened, becoming almost unnatural. There was no wind, no rustle of leaves, no distant calls of creatures hidden in the forest. The silence was oppressive, like a heavy blanket, suffocating and absolute. And then you heard it. A low, deep rumble from far ahead, barely audible at first. It was almost like a growl, but unlike anything you had heard before. The hunger within you stirred, its presence more insistent now, almost demanding. The path opened up ahead, revealing another clearing, though this one was vastly different from the one where you had faced the trial. This one was dark. The trees here were not marble white. They were twisted, gnarled, their bark blackened and cracked as if they had been burned by something ancient, something powerful. Their branches twisted toward the sky in jagged shapes, like the fingers of some skeletal hand reaching upward, clawing at the heavens. At the center of the clearing stood a large stone formation, much like the altar from before, but this one was different. This stone was dark, smooth, black, and polished, like the obsidian of the bowl you had touched. The surface of the stone shimmered, not with light, but with something far darker, a void as though the stone itself had been carved from the very fabric of shadow. And standing before was a figure. At first, it seemed to be just a silhouette, dark against the swirling shadows of the clearing. But as you approached, the figure became clearer. It was tall, towering even, draped in dark robes that shimmered like liquid night. The figure's face was obscured by a hood, but you could feel its presence, the weight of its gaze upon you, even if its eyes were hidden. The rumble you had heard earlier grew louder, now unmistakably a growl. But it wasn't a beast's growl. It was something far older. A primal, deep, resonant sound that seemed to come from the earth itself, vibrating through your very bones. You could feel the hunger stir inside you, much stronger than before, the very air thick with its pull. The figure before the stone did not move, but the energy around it seemed to pulse. Every heartbeat seemed to echo louder in your chest. "You have come far," the figure spoke, its voice low, deep, vibrating with power. It was not a voice you could simply hear, it was a voice you felt. It was a sound that shook the ground, rattled your chest, and settled deep in your soul. And yet, there was something unsettling about it. Something cold and hollow. "You have embraced the hunger," it continued, its tone calm, but filled with an undeniable force. "But now you must understand it. You must accept its power, or become its servant." You swallowed, your throat dry. The figure's words were a challenge. The hunger inside you surged again, clamoring for control, but this time it wasn't out of control. It was more like an ally, a companion, a force that resonated with you on a deep, fundamental level. Still, the figure's warning was clear. Master the hunger or be consumed by it. The air around you shifted, swirling with a strange energy. The figure raised one long, cloaked arm, and a strange, dark glow appeared around the stone, coalescing into a shape. A figure not unlike yourself, standing within the obsidian stone, its features indistinct, its form shadowed. The growl grew louder, and you could feel the hunger inside you rise in response, pushing against your ribs as if to break free. It was no longer just a presence within you. It was a part of you, a reflection of your soul's deepest desires and darkest fears. The figure's voice broke the tension, its words slow and deliberate. To master the hunger, you must face it. Face the shadow that lies within you, the darkness of your own soul. The hunger is a reflection of that shadow. Only by accepting both will you gain control. A cold shiver ran down your spine as the figure's words settled into your mind. This was no longer just a trial of strength or willpower. It was a trial of identity, of understanding who you were. The hunger wasn't just an external force to be controlled, it was a part of your essence. Your darkness, your fear, your desire. You couldn't escape it. You had to face it. You had to embrace it. You stepped forward, your hands trembling. The growl seemed to come from within you now, as if the very stone was calling to the hunger inside you. You could feel it rising, the desire to consume, to give in to that darkness, that force that seemed to be so much a part of your nature. But you had learned to control it. You had learned to shape it. You reached out, your fingers brushing the obsidian stone. The moment your skin made contact, the growl erupted into a deafening roar, a surge of power so intense it nearly knocked you off your feet. The stone shimmered, the shadow within it swirling violently, threatening to consume everything in its wake. But you didn't pull away. You faced it. With a deep breath, you closed your eyes and embraced the hunger. You let it surge through you, the dark power roiling and crashing inside your chest. The force of it almost drowned you, but you did not yield. You accepted it, understood it, became it. The shadow within the stone began to shift, to bend, to change. It was no longer a thing to fear. It was a thing you could shape. The growls faded into a low hum, and the stone before you settled into stillness. The figure did not speak. It did not need to. The silence that filled the clearing was all the answer you needed. You had faced your darkness. You had accepted the hunger inside you. And in that moment, you had mastered it. The trial was not about fighting the hunger. It was about understanding that the darkness within you could never be vanquished. It could only be guided. Only then could you wield its power. The figure before you slowly lowered its arm, its presence no longer as imposing. It was no longer an adversary. It was a teacher, a guide, here to lead you through the next step of your journey. You have passed the trial, the figure said, its voice a whisper now, but with a finality to it. But the true test has only just begun. The forest has claimed you, and you must now claim it. With that, the figure dissolved into the shadows, leaving you alone in the clearing once more. The path ahead remained, but it no longer felt uncertain. You knew now that the forest was not your enemy. It was a part of you, just as the hunger was. And now it was time to shape it, to use it. The trials of the forest had only begun. But you were ready. The air was heavy with stillness, the kind of quiet that presses down on you, demanding something, anything, to break it. But you didn't feel the oppressive weight you had once felt, that gnawing sensation of being trapped within the forest's depths. No, now you felt different. You had faced the hunger, you had embraced it. And now you could feel its power flowing through you like a quiet storm, steady and sure. The shadowy figure was gone, its presence now only a faint memory, but its words, its challenge, echoed in your mind. The true test has only just begun. You stood still for a moment, letting the weight of those words sink in, letting the energy you had unlocked swirl through your body. The hunger was a part of you now, but it was not the overwhelming force it had once been. It was contained, shaped, bent to your will. You could feel it thrumming inside you, but it was more like a pulse, like the rhythm of your own heartbeat, present but not controlling. Still, you knew there was more to be done. The forest had claimed you, and now you had to claim it. But what did that mean? What did it mean to shape the hunger, to guide the forest's power? The path before you was long, winding, and uncertain. But it was clear that there were more trials ahead, more steps to take, more lessons to learn. The hunger might have been tamed for now, but the forest, this place, would not let you leave without teaching you something more, something deeper. The trees that surrounded you shifted slightly, their marble-like trunks creaking and groaning as though they were aware of your presence, as though they were watching you. The whispers were faint now, but still present, filling the air with their soft murmurings. The wind had picked up, though there was no breeze. The movement of the trees was not natural. This was the forest responding to you. It was alive, breathing, shifting in tune with the changes within you. You could feel it just beneath the surface. The pull, the call of the hunger, the force of the forest that was still alive within you. You had learned to control it, yes. But now you had to understand it. You began walking again, the path stretching endlessly before you, a narrow ribbon of stone winding deeper into the heart of the forest. With each step, the atmosphere shifted. The trees became darker, the air thicker. The soft glow of the stones beneath your feet began to fade, replaced by an eerie, shifting light that seemed to pulse and flicker, like a dying fire struggling to hold on. The hunger within you stirred at this change, growing stronger, more insistent. It wasn't a threatening force, not yet. But you could sense it, the pull of the forest's power, urging you forward. The path ahead was not just a physical journey, it was a journey within. Every step you took felt like a step deeper into your own soul, each moment bringing you closer to the core of the hunger that had taken root inside you. You passed through an archway of trees, their branches curving high above you, forming a canopy that blocked out the faint light of the sky. The shadows here were deeper, darker, and the air was thick with a damp, earthy scent. The ground beneath your feet was soft, like mud, but firm, like it had been trampled by countless creatures over time. And then you saw it. Up ahead, the path opened into another clearing, though this one was different from the others. The space before you was wide, almost cavernous, but it was not empty. In the center of the clearing stood a massive, twisting tree. Its trunk was thick and knotted, its bark dark and slick like wet stone. Its branches stretched high into the air, disappearing into the gloom above. And at the base of the tree was a pool, a deep, black pool of water, smooth and reflective, as still as glass. You could feel the pull of the tree, the hunger within you responding to it, the energy of the forest vibrating in your chest. This was no ordinary tree. It was alive with the forest's power, ancient and deep, its roots stretching far below the earth, touching places where light never reached. It felt as though the tree itself was waiting for you, calling to you, as though it recognized the hunger inside you and was now beckoning you to approach. You hesitated for a moment, unsure of what this new trial would be, but the pull of the tree was undeniable. You had come this far. You had faced the hunger, you had embraced it. Now you had to face this, whatever it was. As you stepped closer, the ground seemed to shift beneath your feet, and the whispers grew louder, more insistent. The air was thick with energy, charged and crackling, as though the very forest around you was holding its breath. You reached the edge of the pool, and as you looked into the water, you saw something, not your reflection but something else. Something that made your heart race. At first, it was a blur, just a shadow beneath the water's surface. But as you focused, the shadow took form. It was a figure, a tall, cloaked figure, standing motionless at the bottom of the pool. Its face was obscured, but the energy it radiated was unmistakable. It was dark, ancient, and filled with power, and it was calling to you. The hunger inside you stirred violently, its pull almost unbearable. It was like a chain that had been pulled taut, threatening to snap. You could feel the dark force inside you growing stronger, as though it recognized the figure in the pool. "It is time," the whispers murmured, soft and insistent. "You must face it. You must face what lies beneath." Without thinking, you reached down toward the water, your fingers brushing the cool surface. The moment you touched it, a surge of energy shot up your arm, through your chest, and into your very soul. The pool rippled violently, the figure beneath it twisting and writhing, its shape becoming more defined, more real. And then, with a sudden burst, the figure lunged from the water, rising up in a cloud of mist and shadows, its form towering over you. It was the same cloaked figure you had seen before, the one that had spoken to you in the clearing. But now it was different. It was not just a figure. It was you. The figure's face was the same as yours, but it was twisted, darkened, hollow, as though it were a reflection of everything you had been afraid to face within yourself. The hunger, the darkness, the fear, it was all there, embodied in this shadow of yourself. The figure's eyes were empty voids of endless black, but when it spoke, its voice was unmistakable. "Do you see now?" it asked, its voice a hollow echo of your own. "Do you understand what you carry within you? What you have become?" You took a step back, but the figure mirrored your every move, blocking your path. Its hand reached out, the fingers long and skeletal, a mirror of your own. The forest has claimed you, and in turn you have claimed it. But what will you do with its power? What will you become when you face the darkness that lies within you? The hunger surged within you, and for a moment you felt yourself slipping into the darkness, into the shadow of this twisted version of yourself. The pull was strong. The shadow was real, alive, and it was everything you had fought to escape. It was your fear. It was your guilt. It was everything you had tried to outrun in the forest. But you had learned to control the hunger. You had learned to shape it, to use it. "You are not me," you said, your voice steady though your heart was pounding. "You are a shadow, a reflection, but I will not be consumed by you." The figure's lips twisted into a smile, a cold, knowing smile. "We shall see." And in that moment you realized the truth. This wasn't a trial to defeat the hunger. It was a trial to understand it. To understand that the darkness within you was not something to run from, but something to face, to accept, and to wield. The shadow, the hunger, it was all a part of you. And now you had to choose how you would use it. The figure stepped back, dissolving into the mist with a final, whispered laugh. The pool returned to its still, black surface, but something had shifted. The hunger inside you, though strong, was no longer something you feared. It was part of you. And now you would learn to control it, not just for survival, but for something greater. The true test had begun, but you were ready. You had faced the shadow. Now you would face the forest. The air around you was thick with energy, the weight of your confrontation with the shadow still lingering in your bones. You stood at the edge of the pool, the eerie calm settling over you like the aftermath of a thunderstorm. The shadow that had once threatened to consume you was gone, but its presence still echoed through your mind. His voice, your voice, had filled the clearing, warning you, challenging you. And you had stood firm. You had chosen to face the hunger not as an enemy, but as a force you could command. As the ripples from the pool's surface faded, the forest around you seemed to pause, as if the trees themselves were holding their breath, waiting for what would come next. The air grew colder again, the heavy stillness pressing down on you like a thick fog. You could feel the power inside you, a deep, pulsing energy that hummed beneath your skin, just out of reach but unmistakable in its presence. The hunger was there, yes, but it was no longer something that threatened to devour you. It was a part of you now, integral, primal, undeniable. The path ahead of you stretched out once more, winding through the shadowed trees, the dark canopy above flickering with flashes of pale light. The marble-like trunks seemed to lean in closer, their eerie, glowing presence offering no warmth, no comfort, only the quiet pulse of something ancient and wild. You were no longer a wanderer in this forest. You were a part of it. The hunger within you hummed in response to the energy all around you. The forest was alive with the same pulse, the same rhythm. It was as though the trees, the ground beneath your feet, the air itself, were waiting for you to decide what to do next. The hunger, the power you had unlocked, it was not a gift. It was a responsibility, a test. And the forest was watching, its quiet whispers filling the air, urging you forward. What will you do? They seemed to ask. What will you become? You took a deep breath and continued along the path, each step deliberate, as though the very act of moving forward was a decision that carried weight. The trees shifted again as you passed, their branches curling and twisting, almost as though they were alive, responding to your every movement. The path before you was growing darker, the light dimming with each step, until the glow of the stones beneath your feet seemed to be the only source of illumination. But then a flash of light broke through the canopy above, and for a brief moment the darkness seemed to part, revealing something ahead of you, something you had not noticed before. In the center of the path, nestled between two gnarled trees, stood a small stone archway, its surface etched with ancient symbols, its shape jagged as though it had been forged in a time long past. The hunger inside you pulsed sharply, a sudden rush of power that threatened to overwhelm you. You had felt this before, in the pool, in the shadow, this pull. This was no ordinary archway. This was a threshold, a gate of sorts, and it was calling to you just as the hunger had called to you, just as the forest had called to you. You moved closer, your hand reaching out, but before you could touch the stone, a voice broke the silence. Not yet. The voice was low, deep, resonant, like the sound of distant thunder rolling through the trees. It was familiar. It was the same voice that had spoken to you in the clearing, the same voice that had challenged you to face your darkness. The figure, the one in the black robes, was standing just beyond the archway, his form casting a long shadow across the stones. You have embraced the hunger, the figure said, its voice calm but filled with a quiet power. But there is more you must understand. This path does not end here. This gate is not the end of your journey. It is the beginning. You paused, your heart pounding. The hunger inside you stirred again, responding to the figure's presence, but you did not feel threatened. Instead, you felt drawn to it. You could sense that this was not just an obstacle. There was an invitation. The figure stepped forward, his black robes swishing softly against the forest floor. The air around him seemed to shimmer, the darkness bending in his presence. You have come this far, the figure continued, but now you must face the heart of the forest. The hunger is but a part of it. To claim your place in this world, to truly shape the power you possess, you must understand the balance. You must face the heart of the forest, and in doing so, you will learn the final truth. Power without understanding is nothing but destruction. The words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. You had felt the power of the forest coursing through you. You had felt the hunger, the pull, the desire for more. But you knew deep down that the figure's words were true. Power without control, without purpose, would consume everything in its path. You had already seen what the hunger could do when left unchecked. It could twist, distort, destroy. It could consume. "What must I do?" you asked, your voice steady despite the weight of the figure's words. "How do I face the heart of the forest?" The figure's smile was slow, deliberate, as though he had been waiting for you to ask that very question. He raised a hand, his fingers moving in slow, intricate patterns through the air. The ground beneath your feet seemed to pulse, the energy in the air growing stronger. "You have already begun," he said. "The hunger is not something you can defeat. It is something you must understand. It is a part of the forest. It is a part of you. But the forest is not just darkness and hunger. It is life. It is creation, destruction, and rebirth. You must learn to balance these forces. And to do so, you must walk through the heart of the forest." He stepped aside, gesturing toward the archway. The energy around it shifted, swirling like smoke, and you could feel the pull, stronger now, more insistent. The hunger inside you responded, thrumming beneath your skin, as if it recognized this moment for what it was. This was the final test. The archway stood before you, dark and foreboding, the symbols on its surface glowing faintly in the dim light. There was no going back now. The forest had claimed you, and you had claimed it. But to truly shape your power, to understand it, you had to face what lay beyond this gate. The figure spoke again, his voice quiet, but filled with a weight that settled deep in your chest. "You will see what the forest truly is. You will see its heart. And you will decide how to wield its power." You took a deep breath, the air thick with anticipation, and stepped forward. As you crossed beneath the archway, the world around you seemed to shift. The trees stretched higher, their forms growing more twisted and gnarled, their roots burrowing deep into the earth. The hunger inside you pulsed violently, but you did not flinch. You felt the energy of the forest grow stronger, as though the very land beneath you was awakening. The ground beneath your feet began to tremble, the earth shifting as though something massive was moving beneath it. You could feel the heartbeat of the forest, steady and rhythmic, reverberating through your chest. And ahead you saw it, a great, towering tree, its bark dark and slick, its branches reaching high into the sky. It was massive, its roots sprawling out in every direction, as though it were the very center of the world. This was the heart of the forest. You stepped forward, the hunger inside you responding to the presence of the tree, the forest's pulse echoing through your body. But there was something else here, something older, deeper, a force beyond even the hunger. The figure's voice echoed in your mind. "You must understand the balance. Only then will you be able to wield the power of the forest." The heart of the forest beckoned, and you were ready to face it. The air around you thickened, the trees bending ever closer, their roots stretching deep beneath your feet as if the very ground beneath you was alive. The heart of the forest pulsed with a deep, rhythmic energy, as though it were breathing, alive in ways you hadn't yet understood. The great tree that loomed ahead was not just a tree, it was the embodiment of the forest itself. Its bark shimmered in the low, eerie light, as though its surface were alive, breathing in time with the very pulse of the earth. You stepped forward cautiously, your heart thumping loudly in your chest. The hunger inside you shifted, a familiar stirring that had become an ever-present companion. It was no longer a thing that threatened to overwhelm you, but rather a steady force that hummed beneath your skin, waiting for you to call upon it. It felt like the very air around you had become charged with this same energy, the deep power of the forest radiating from the towering tree before you. As you moved closer, the shadows around you seemed to stretch and dance, flickering like flames in the periphery of your vision. But the tree, the heart of the forest, remained still, its branches stretching like fingers reaching out toward the sky. It was ancient. It had seen countless seasons pass, had weathered storms and sunlight alike, standing strong against the passage of time. And yet, there was something unsettling about it, a presence, something primal that called to the very marrow of your bones. The hunger inside you stirred again, stronger now, its power calling in response to the tree's presence. There was a connection between the two, something deep and unspoken, like an ancient bond forged in the depths of the earth itself. This was the heart of the forest. This was the source of the power you had claimed. You could feel the weight of it, the responsibility of what you were about to face. The figure's words echoed in your mind. You must understand the balance. Only then will you be able to wield the power of the forest. The hunger, while not overwhelming, tugged at the edges of your consciousness. It wanted something. It wanted to devour. But that was not what this place was about. No, here, in the heart of the forest, you had to learn to control it. You had to understand it. The ground trembled beneath your feet, and the shadows around the tree seemed to grow deeper, darker, as though the very heart of the forest was opening up to you. You could hear the sound of wind, low and mournful, sweeping through the branches above, carrying with it the scent of earth and rain, of something ancient, untouched by time. And then you heard it, an unmistakable sound, faint at first but growing louder. A low, deep rumble like the sound of distant thunder. It resonated through the ground, vibrating in your chest, a pulse that seemed to come from the very heart of the tree. The hunger inside you stirred again, and this time, it was not a gentle pull. It was urgent, desperate, like a wild beast wanting to break free. The rumble grew louder still, and the ground beneath you trembled in response. You looked around, but there was nothing to explain it. No creature, no beast, no threat. It was as if the forest itself was reacting to your presence, responding to the power inside you. The hunger, this primal force within you, was in sync with the very rhythm of the forest. And then the ground cracked. A deep fissure opened up beneath the tree, splitting the earth like a wound, and from it, a dark, shadowy figure emerged. At first, it was a mere silhouette, a shadow rising from the depths of the earth. But as it fully emerged, the figure took shape, towering above you. Its body was made of twisted vines and blackened wood, its eyes glowing a deep, sickly green. It was not human, not even animal. It was something older, something more primal, a creature born of the earth itself, a guardian of the forest's deepest secrets. The hunger inside you surged, its power demanding release, but you held firm. This was not the time to give in. This creature, this guardian of the forest, was not an enemy to be defeated. It was a force to be understood. The creature's voice was like the sound of ancient trees groaning under the weight of centuries. You stand at the heart of the forest now, it spoke, its voice resonating in your bones. This is not just the place of power. This is the birthplace of all things. Life, death, rebirth. The hunger inside you pulsed again, more urgently this time, and the guardian's eyes flashed with understanding. You have awakened the hunger, it said. But you must understand that hunger is not a force to be controlled. It is a force to be balanced. For what consumes life also gives birth to it. What destroys can also create. The word sent a shockwave through you, shaking your very soul. Balance. You had felt the hunger, the desire to consume. But you had also felt the pull of the forest, the rhythm of life, the push of creation. It wasn't just destruction. It was rebirth. You had learned to control the hunger, but you hadn't understood its true nature. Not yet. The guardian took a step forward, and the earth beneath you seemed to tremble in response. To truly wield the power of the forest, to claim your place here, you must understand that both creation and destruction are part of the same force. You must embrace them both. Only then will you be worthy of the forest's heart. The hunger inside you surged again, but this time it felt different. It wasn't the raging beast it had once been. It was something else now, something quieter, more controlled. You could feel its power, but it no longer threatened to consume you. It responded to the balance the guardian had spoken of. You looked at the guardian, feeling the weight of its words. It wasn't just about controlling the hunger. It was about understanding it, about using its power to create, to give life, not just to destroy. The hunger was a force of nature, one that was as old as the forest itself. It was not to be feared. It was to be embraced. The guardian nodded slowly, as though it had seen the shift within you. You have come far, it said, its voice softening. But the journey does not end here. You must walk the path of balance. You must learn to use both sides of the power within you, life and death, creation and destruction. Only then will you find peace. With that, the guardian stepped back, its form dissolving into the shadows once more. The ground beneath you trembled, and the fissure in the earth closed, sealing once more. The pulse of the forest remained strong, but the urgency of the hunger had faded, replaced by a deeper understanding, a connection to the forest's heart. The path ahead seemed clearer now, though the shadows still clung to the edges of your vision. The trees, once so imposing, now seemed like ancient sentinels watching over you, guiding you forward. The hunger inside you no longer felt like an uncontrollable force. It felt like a part of you, a part of the forest, something you could shape, use, and understand. You had faced the darkness within yourself. You had faced the guardian of the forest. And now you had learned the balance. Life and death, creation and destruction. These were the forces that shaped the world. And you too were a part of that balance. The path stretched before you, and with each step, you felt the power of the forest pulsing within you, guiding you, urging you forward. The hunger was still there, but it was no longer something to fear. It was a force to be understood, a force to be shaped. And now, with the heart of the forest at your back, you were ready to walk the path of balance. The forest around you whispered, its language ancient and deep. a language that resonated not in words, but in the very rhythm of the earth, in the pulse of the wind, in the shifting of shadows beneath the canopy. The hunger within you still throbbed, but now it felt different. It no longer felt like a ravenous beast waiting to devour everything in its path. It was a steady, almost comforting presence, an energy that flowed through you like a river, powerful yet controlled. The path before you stretched on, winding deeper into the heart of the forest. The trees that once seemed foreboding now appeared as ancient guardians, their bark etched with the memories of countless lifetimes. Their branches reached high into the sky, twisting and curling like hands stretching toward the heavens, as though they were beckoning you to follow. And follow you did, step by deliberate step, the rhythm of your footfalls in sync with the pulse of the earth beneath you. The hunger, that primal force that had once threatened to consume you, was now a companion, a guide. The balance you had sought to understand was becoming clearer with every moment. Creation, destruction. Life, death. The hunger was not just a force of destruction, it was also a force of creation. It could bring life as easily as it could take it. And you could wield that power. The forest had shown you its heart, and in return, you had opened your own. You had faced the darkness within yourself, the fear of being consumed by the very hunger you had tried to escape. And now you understood. You understood the forest's whispers, its rhythm, its pulse. The hunger was not something to be feared or rejected. It was something to be channeled, something to be shaped and guided, just as the forest shaped the seasons, the stars, the winds. As you walked deeper into the forest, the air around you thickened again. The trees grew denser, their trunks larger and more twisted, their branches heavy with dark leaves that rustled in a language only the wind seemed to understand. The ground beneath your feet grew softer, like the earth itself was inviting you to sink deeper, to become one with the forest. The air smelled of damp moss, wet leaves, and the earthy scent of something ancient. And then, as though the forest itself had been holding its breath, you came to another clearing. This one was different. In the center of the clearing stood a massive stone structure, ancient and weathered, its surface covered in creeping vines and moss. It was not a natural part of the forest, but it was as much a part of this world as the trees and the earth beneath your feet. The stone was carved with intricate patterns, symbols you could not understand, but they pulsed with a power that felt as ancient as the hunger itself. The hunger inside you stirred, more strongly now, as if it recognized the power in the stones, as if it was drawn to it. You could feel the pull, the magnetic force of the structure calling you to approach. Without hesitation, you moved toward the stone, the hunger inside you both a guide and a warning. It was not an invitation to devour, but an invitation to understand. The stone had a rhythm to it, a pulse that matched the heartbeat of the forest. As you reached the base of the stone, you placed your hand against its surface. The moment your skin made contact with the cold stone, a surge of energy shot through you as though the stone were alive, breathing with the same rhythm that now pulsed through your veins. Your vision blurred for a moment, and in that fleeting moment you saw it, the truth. You saw the forest in its entirety, not as it was now, but as it had always been. The stone had been here long before you, long before the hunger had taken root inside you. It had been a part of the balance, a guardian of the ancient powers that ran through the veins of the earth. The hunger, the forest, the stone, it was all connected, a web of forces that shaped the very fabric of this world. The hunger was not a mistake. It was not an aberration. It was necessary. Without hunger there could be no life. Without destruction there could be no creation. The forest, the world, the very essence of existence. Everything was built upon the balance of these forces. Life, death, creation, destruction, hunger and fulfillment. It was all one. And you were a part of that balance. The stone before you trembled as though acknowledging your understanding. A soft hum filled the air, vibrating through your body, through your soul, and as it did, the symbols etched into the stone began to glow. Light poured from the stone, flooding the clearing with a pale, ethereal glow, and as the light swirled around you, you felt the hunger inside you surge once more. But this time it wasn't overwhelming. It wasn't a force of destruction. It was a force, a tool. A tool to shape, to create, to destroy when necessary, but never recklessly. You had learned to wield it. You had learned to embrace it. The light continued to swirl around you, and as it did, the air shifted. The forest, the trees, the stone, they all seemed to breathe in unison. You were no longer an outsider, no longer a mere traveler in this world. You were a part of it. Your power, the hunger within you, was a part of the forest's pulse. And the forest's power was a part of you. As the light began to fade, the stone returned to its dormant state. The hum died down, but the energy remained. The hunger inside you had been tempered, shaped by your understanding, by your journey. It no longer felt like a curse or a burden. It was a gift that would allow you to shape the world as the forest had shaped you. You stepped back from the stone, the clearing now bathed in the soft glow of the moon. The hunger still thrummed beneath your skin, but it no longer felt like an insatiable beast. It was a force, a power, a tool, and you were its master. The path before you stretched on, winding through the trees, deeper into the heart of the forest. The hunger inside you was no longer a thing of fear. It was a part of you, a part of the forest's pulse, and with each step, you felt yourself growing more attuned to its rhythm. You were no longer lost in the forest. You were part of it. And the hunger inside you? It was not something to fear. It was something to embrace, to use, to shape the world around you. The path before you was clear, but you knew that there were still many lessons to learn, many trials to face. The forest was vast, its depths full of mysteries yet to be uncovered. But you were ready. The hunger had taught you that. And with it, you would face whatever came next, not as a victim, but as a force in your own right. You had found the balance. And now, you would shape the world around you. The forest had changed, but so had you. The hunger, now woven into the fabric of your being, had become something you could control, something you could shape. It no longer threatened to devour you. Instead, it was a power you could use as the forest had used it for eons. The stone had shown you that the forces of creation and destruction were never separate. They were two sides of the same coin. Without one, the other could not exist. And now, with that knowledge, you had become something more, something in tune with the world around you. As you continued along the winding path, the forest seemed to welcome you. The trees parted slightly as you walked, as though they recognized your presence. The wind shifted, its whispers gentler now, guiding you forward. The hunger thrummed softly in the back of your mind, but it was no longer a threat. It was a companion, a force that now worked with you, not against you. The forest ahead grew darker, though not in a menacing way. The canopy above thickened, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch and twist like living things. The air grew cooler, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was invigorating, as if the forest was pulling you deeper into its heart. You could feel its rhythm, its pulse, beating in time with your own heart. Something was changing in the air. It was subtle at first, a shift, a vibration beneath your feet, as if the very earth was waking from a deep slumber. The hunger inside you stirred, but not in the same way it had before. It wasn't the familiar, gnawing ache that had once been your constant companion. It was more like a gentle nudge, a reminder that you were still part of something much larger than yourself. The trees around you seemed to shift, their trunks stretching high into the sky, their branches twisting and curling in ways that defied natural law. The path grew narrower, the ground beneath you uneven, as though the forest was responding to your presence, pushing you forward. You could hear the faint sound of something, a distant rumble like thunder, low and ominous. But it wasn't the kind of thunder that came before a storm. No, this felt different. It was deeper, more primal, as though the very bones of the earth were stirring. You continued walking, each step taking you deeper into the heart of the forest. The shadows seemed to grow longer, darker, twisting into shapes that played at the edges of your vision. They weren't threatening, but they were watching, observing you. It was as though the forest was aware of your every move, as if it were studying you, learning you just as you were learning it. And then you saw it. Through the dense trees, barely visible between the twisting trunks, you saw a flicker of light, a faint golden glow like a candle burning in the distance. It wasn't natural. It wasn't the glow of the moonlight filtering through the trees, nor was it the pale, ethereal light that had come from the stone. No, this was something different. It was alive, a pulse of light, steady and unyielding, calling to you. The hunger within you stirred again, stronger this time, its pull more insistent. You could feel it resonating with the light, responding to it. The forest, too, seemed to be drawn to it. The air around you thickened, and the shadows that had once seemed so benign began to shift, becoming more defined, more deliberate in their movements. The path you were on split then, diverging into two separate trails. One led deeper into the darkness, its way obscured by twisted roots and thick underbrush. The other led toward the flickering light. Without hesitation, you chose the path toward the light, drawn to it by an invisible force that seemed to speak to the very core of your being. As you moved closer, the air grew warmer, the oppressive chill of the forest receding. The golden light grew brighter, pulsing with a steady rhythm, like the heartbeat of the world itself. You pushed through the dense underbrush, your footsteps quickening, your breath coming faster. And then, just as you emerged from the trees, you saw it, a structure ancient and towering, bathed in golden light. It was a tree, but unlike any tree you had ever seen. Its bark was not the dark, gnarled wood of the forest. It was smooth, almost translucent, shimmering with a soft golden hue, as though it were made from light itself. Its branches stretched high above you, twisting into the sky like the arms of a god, each one covered in delicate, glowing flowers that pulsed with the same rhythm as the light. The air around it was thick with energy, vibrating with the power of creation itself. The hunger inside you surged once more, but this time, it wasn't a desperate yearning. It was a recognition. The hunger understood this tree. It understood the power it represented. This was no ordinary tree. This was the heart of creation itself, a force that gave life, that nurtured, that brought forth new growth from the very soil it stood upon. You approached the tree slowly, your heart pounding in your chest. The light seemed to reach out to you, wrapping around you like a warm embrace. The energy in the air was overwhelming, and for the first time since your journey began, you felt small. You felt like an insignificant part of something much, much larger. But as you stepped closer to the tree, you felt the hunger within you align with it. The two forces, creation and destruction, were not opposites. They were intertwined, inseparable. The hunger, in its purest form, was a part of this tree's power. It was the force that allowed new life to grow, the force that cleared away the old, making space for the new. It was not an enemy. It was a tool. A tool to shape the world, to mold it, to give it purpose. And then, just as you reached the base of the tree, a voice spoke. It wasn't the guardian's voice, nor the voice of the shadows that had haunted you. This voice was different, softer yet more powerful. It was the voice of the forest itself, of the tree, of the world that had shaped you. You have come far, it said, but you are not yet whole. You must learn the final truth. What you shape, you must also nurture. What you create, you must care for. The hunger is not a force of destruction alone. It is the force of rebirth. You must wield it with respect, with understanding. The world you shape is not yours alone. You stepped back, the weight of the words settling deep in your chest. You had learned to control the hunger. You had learned to wield it. But now you understood. You had to learn to nurture it as well. To use it not only to destroy, but to create, to give life, to shape the world in ways that honored both creation and destruction. The tree's golden light flickered, its branches swaying in a wind that only it seemed to feel. The hunger within you settled, its pull no longer urgent, but steady. You were not alone in this. The forest, the tree, the hunger, they were all part of the same cycle. And you were now part of that cycle too. The path ahead was still shrouded in mystery, but you knew that you were ready. The forest had shown you its heart, and you had understood it. You had embraced its power and learned its balance. Now, you were no longer just a wanderer, no longer just a vessel for the hunger. You were a force in your own right, one that would shape the world around you, not with fear, but with purpose. As the golden light from the tree faded into the night, you took one final look at the path that lay ahead. The forest was vast, its depths unknown, but you no longer felt lost. The hunger was no longer something to fear. It was something to wield. And with that understanding, you stepped forward, ready to face whatever came next. The golden light of the ancient tree dimmed as you turned away from it, the forest around you slowly swallowing the last flickers of its brilliance. The path before you had been revealed, not just a literal path through the forest, but a path of purpose, a journey to understand, shape, and wield the forces that governed life and death, creation and destruction. You felt it deep inside, a sense of responsibility. The hunger, now a familiar presence, thrummed beneath your skin, more attuned to you than ever before. It was no longer just a raw, insatiable force. It had become a partner, a tool, a medium for change. But now you understood that what you created would need to be nurtured, protected, and allowed to grow. The hunger could tear down, but it could also give life. As you walked away from the ancient tree, the forest around you seemed to pulse with life. Each step you took in rhythm with the deep hum that vibrated through the ground. The trees no longer whispered their warnings, but offered guidance, their leaves brushing softly against each other like old friends greeting you. The forest seemed to acknowledge the change in you, the shift from fear to understanding, from destruction to creation. You moved deeper into the wilderness, guided by the path that seemed to open before you with each step. The hunger inside you had settled, its intensity reduced to a steady thrum, like the beat of a distant drum calling you forward. Your thoughts were clearer now, more focused. The storm of emotions that had raged inside you, the fear, the power, the darkness, had found their place. It was no longer chaos. It was balance. The trees began to thin as you walked, the air growing lighter, the oppressive weight of the forest receding. In the distance you saw it, a clearing. But this was not like the other clearings you had encountered before. The air around it was thick with a sense of anticipation, as though something important was about to unfold. You stepped into the clearing, the ground soft beneath your feet, the smell of fresh earth filling your senses. In the center of the clearing stood a large stone pedestal, its surface etched with strange symbols, symbols you recognized now. The same symbols that had appeared on the ancient stone, glowing with power, connected to the forest's heartbeat, to the hunger within you. The pedestal was not just an object. It was a focal point, a center where forces would converge. The air hummed with the promise of something new. The hunger inside you stirred once more, but this time, it wasn't a violent surge. It was more like a ripple, a beckoning. It called to you, urging you toward the pedestal. You reached out, placing your hand upon the stone surface. The moment your skin made contact, a surge of energy flooded through you, a wave of power, of potential. The symbols on the pedestal began to glow with the same golden light you had seen at the heart of the forest. It was as if the tree, the hunger, and the forest had all come together in this place, ready for something to happen. The hunger within you responded, swirling around you, feeding off the energy. The ground trembled beneath your feet, and the air grew thick with power. Something was awakening. The pedestal, once inert, began to hum, vibrating in time with your heartbeat. The hunger surged again, but this time, it wasn't a consuming force. It was a force of creation, the energy of life itself. The symbols on the stone began to shift, swirling and rearranging, as if the pedestal were alive, evolving, growing with each pulse of energy. The glow of the symbols intensified, reaching out like tendrils of light, weaving around you, around the clearing. The forest itself seemed to hold its breath, the wind still, the trees frozen in place, watching. And then, with a deafening crack, the stone split open. From the center of the pedestal, a brilliant light exploded outward, filling the clearing with an overwhelming brilliance. The hunger inside you flared, not in panic, but in anticipation. You could feel the power of the forest, the essence of creation, coursing through you, through the very land beneath your feet. The light took shape, swirling around you like a whirlwind. It was not just light, it was life. The very essence of creation was manifesting before your eyes. From the glowing energy, shapes began to form. First, amorphous, swirling, formless, but soon they began to take shape. The soft curvature of a leaf, the delicate branches of a tree, the body of an animal. The hunger inside you pulsed with each formation, each new creation, feeding on the life that was springing from the pedestal. It wasn't just the creation of plants or creatures. It was the creation of ideas, of potential. Every shape that formed held something deeper, something more complex. The pedestal was not just a source of life. It was a mirror, reflecting the very essence of the forest's heart, the power of creation that lived within you. The hunger had fed on the life that had been given, but it was no longer consuming for the sake of destruction. It was part of the cycle now, creation, destruction, rebirth. You watched, transfixed, as the light coalesced into a figure, a form taking shape before your eyes. It was humanoid, but not entirely human. Its body was made of the same golden light, its features soft and ethereal, as if it were part of the forest itself. Its eyes, deep and ancient, looked at you with a knowing gaze, as if it understood you in ways you could not yet comprehend. The figure spoke, its voice melodic and deep, resonating with the power of the forest itself. You have embraced the hunger. But now you must learn what it means to create. What you shape, you must nurture. What you destroy, you must replace. This is the way of the forest. This is the way of life. The words echoed through you, their weight settling deep in your soul. The hunger within you pulsed once more, but this time it was not urgent. It was patient, understanding. The figure gestured toward the creations that had manifested from the pedestal. The trees, the animals, the life that had sprouted from the very energy you had released. You are a part of this cycle now, the figure continued. The hunger will always be a part of you, but you must use it to shape, to create, to bring life into the world. You have learned to control the darkness within you, but now you must learn to guide it. Use it to foster life, not just to destroy. The forest has shown you the path, and now it is your choice. What will you create? The hunger within you stirred, and for the first time, it did not feel like a beast. It felt like a force of potential, a force of life and death, of beginnings and endings. You looked around the clearing at the creations that had sprung from the pedestal, and for the first time you understood. The hunger was not an enemy to be vanquished. It was not a curse. It was part of the cycle, part of the rhythm of the forest, part of the energy that gave life to all things. The figure began to fade, its light dissipating into the air, leaving only the soft glow of the pedestal behind. Its final words echoed in your mind, remember, what you create you must care for. What you destroy you must replace. This is your path now. And with that, the clearing fell silent, the forest resuming its natural hum, as though nothing had ever changed. But everything had changed. You had changed. The hunger, the power within you was no longer something to fear. It was something to embrace. The path ahead of you was clearer now. Your purpose was clearer. You had the power to create, to shape, and to nurture life just as you had learned to destroy, to clear the way for new growth. The forest had shown you that both sides of this force were necessary, that creation and destruction were two halves of the same whole. You stepped back from the pedestal, the last remnants of golden light fading into the night. The forest was still, the wind whispering softly through the trees as if in acknowledgement. You had found your place in the world. You were no longer lost. You were part of the cycle. And now you would shape it. The forest, silent and watchful, stretched before you like a living entity, its presence no longer distant but intimate, as if the earth itself had become a part of your very soul. The golden light from the pedestal had faded, but its warmth lingered in the air, clinging to your skin, filling you with a quiet but undeniable sense of power. It was no longer just the hunger that burned within you, it was the hunger and the knowledge, the ability to shape, to mold, to bring new life into the world. The path ahead was still unclear, yet it no longer seemed daunting. It felt like a promise. The hunger inside you hummed, no longer a primal, overwhelming force, but a steady, controlled energy. The tool. A power that you could wield, that you had learned to guide as the forest had taught you. Creation, destruction, life, death. All of these forces intertwined, and you were now a part of that intricate dance as old as the forest itself. You looked around, taking in the world with new eyes. The forest wasn't just a place. It was a living, breathing organism, connected in ways you had only just begun to understand. The trees stood tall, their roots intertwining beneath the earth, reaching for each other, holding the land together. The animals moved with purpose, each one part of a larger cycle, playing their role in the balance. Even the air seemed to hum with life, the very essence of creation surrounding you in every direction. For the first time, you felt that you were a part of it, not just a visitor in this world, but an integral force. The hunger inside you pulsed, but it was no longer overwhelming. It was a steady current, a force of nature that could create as easily as it could destroy. You had learned the balance. You had learned the rhythm. The clearing where the pedestal had once stood was now peaceful, the air thick with the energy of new beginnings. The life you had helped to create was thriving, trees stretching toward the sky, animals moving through the underbrush, and plants sprouting from the soil in delicate patterns. The pedestal had transformed into something else entirely, no longer just a source of power, but a gateway, a bridge between worlds. You could feel it now, the connection that linked the forest, the cycle of life and death, and you. You took a step forward, your feet sinking into the soft earth, and as you did, the forest responded. The trees shifted, their branches creaking as if bowing to your presence. The hunger stirred, but not in fear. No, it was in harmony with you now, like a quiet song playing in the background, guiding you, urging you to move forward. And then, in the distance, you heard it. A sound, faint at first, like the rustling of leaves in the wind. But it was more than that. It was a calling. A voice, gentle and deep, reached out from the shadows of the forest, carrying with it the weight of ancient knowledge. Come, it said, the word reverberating through the air, through the very ground beneath your feet. Come and learn what lies beyond the hunger. You knew that voice. It was familiar, like the rustling of the trees themselves, like the murmur of the forest at night. It was the same voice you had heard in the moments of clarity, the voice that had guided you, challenged you. The guardian of the forest, the force that had shown you the path to the heart of creation. You followed the voice, your steps no longer hesitant, but purposeful. The hunger within you had become a part of your soul, not a force to be reckoned with, but a companion, a guide. The air shifted around you, growing thicker as you moved deeper into the forest. The path narrowed, the trees growing closer together, their roots twisting beneath the earth like serpents. You pushed through the underbrush, your eyes catching glimpses of movement in the shadows, eyes gleaming, shapes darting just out of sight. The forest was alive, more alive than it had ever seemed before. And you were no longer an outsider. You were one with it, a force of nature that could bend the world to its will. As you reached the edge of another clearing, you stopped. The trees parted before you, revealing a vast, open space unlike any you had encountered before. At the center of the clearing stood a towering figure, its form cloaked in shadows, its presence undeniable. It was the guardian, but it was not the same figure you had seen before. This being was different, more ancient, more powerful, as though it had existed before time itself had begun. The guardian's eyes glowed a faint blue, piercing through the shadows as it locked its gaze with yours. There was no hostility in its expression, only a deep, knowing gaze that seemed to see straight through you, into the very core of your being. It knew what you had become. It knew the changes that had taken place within you. You have come, the guardian spoke, its voice like the rumbling of distant thunder, filled with both power and warmth. You have walked the path of hunger, of creation. And now you must walk the path of understanding. The air around you crackled with energy, the very ground beneath you vibrating with the weight of its words. The hunger inside you stirred once more, but this time, it wasn't a call to action. It was a call to understanding. The power, the forces you had learned to shape, they were not for you alone. They were part of something greater, a cycle that spanned across the forest, across the world. You have learned to wield the hunger, the guardian continued, its eyes never leaving yours. But now you must learn to give it purpose. For creation without purpose is chaos. Destruction without purpose is ruin. The hunger is not an end in itself. It is a beginning. You stood in the clearing, the guardian's words settling deep in your mind. You had learned to control the hunger. You had learned to create and destroy, to shape and reshape the world around you. But now you understood that there was more to it than just wielding power. There was a responsibility, a purpose that came with it. The hunger had to be guided, shaped not just by your desires, but by the balance of life and death, of creation and destruction. The guardian stepped forward, its form flickering like a shadow in the wind. The forest has shown you its heart, it said, its voice softening. Now it is time for you to understand your place within it. The trees around you seemed to bow, their branches lowering in reverence. The hunger inside you shifted, no longer a force to be feared but a force to be understood. You had learned that creation and destruction were not opposing forces. They were parts of a cycle, each one necessary, each one feeding into the other. But now you had to understand what it meant to wield that power with purpose, with intention. You are the keeper of the cycle now, the guardian said. The forest has chosen you. But to truly understand the hunger, to truly master it, you must learn to give it purpose. Only then can you shape the world as it was meant to be. You nodded, the weight of the words sinking deep into your bones. You had walked the path of hunger, of creation and destruction, but now you realized there was still more to learn. The hunger was not just a power. It was a force. A force that could shape the world, but only if you knew how to guide it, how to use it with purpose. The guardian's form began to fade, its voice lingering in the air. You have come far. But the journey is not over. The forest will continue to test you. The hunger will continue to call. But now you will walk the path with understanding. And through that understanding you will shape the world. As the guardian vanished into the shadows, you stood alone in the clearing. The hunger inside you was steady now, a quiet pulse that resonated with the world around you. The forest was still, but you could feel its presence, its pulse, its rhythm. You were no longer an outsider. You were part of the cycle. The path ahead was no longer unclear. It was a path of purpose, a path that you and only you could walk. The forest had shown you its heart, and now it was time for you to show the world your own. The guardian's departure left the clearing still, yet the weight of its presence lingered in the air, as palpable as the pulse of the forest itself. The hunger, still contained but powerful, thrummed softly within you. It was not an aggressive, desperate force now, but something more akin to an instinct, a knowing. You had been shown the balance, the force of creation and destruction, the cycle of life and death. But now the true challenge lay before you, purpose. Purpose was not something easily defined or understood. It was not something that could simply be grasped in a moment of clarity. It was a journey in itself, a path you would have to walk not just for yourself but for the forest, the cycle, and everything that lived within it. What you created would not simply exist. It would interact with the world around it, ripple outward into the delicate equilibrium that sustained the very life you had come to understand. The guardian's words echoed in your mind. The hunger is not an end in itself. It is a beginning. You felt that truth now, like a seed planted deep within your soul. Creation was not a singular act. It was the start of something far greater, something interconnected and fluid. To shape the world was to give it life, to nurture it, to guide it in ways that would allow it to grow, to change, to thrive. The path you had walked was not one of destruction. It was one of understanding, of connection. And the hunger, which you had once feared, was now an extension of your will. You were not its master. You were its partner, its guide. And in the same way, you were part of the forest's pulse. The life you would create would not only come from you, it would be a gift to the world around you, a gift that would continue to grow, to change, to shape the world in ways you could not yet understand. With each breath, you felt the weight of responsibility settling upon your shoulders. The forest had given you power, but it had also given you knowledge. You understood now that power without purpose was nothing more than chaos. The hunger, the force that had so long lived within you, would need to be guided with intention. Every creation, every life brought forth, would need to be nurtured, protected, and allowed to flourish. As you stood there in the clearing, the air around you thick with the lingering hum of energy, the trees seemed to part as if inviting you to continue. The wind, once still, began to stir, a soft whisper running through the branches. There was a beckoning. The forest was waiting for you to step forward, to take your place in the cycle. You could feel it in the very ground beneath your feet. The earth was alive, shifting, responding to your presence. You took a step forward, the hunger inside you stirring gently in response. The path was not clear, but that was not a source of fear. The uncertainty, the unknown, was now a part of the journey. It was the cycle's way, life and death, creation and destruction. They were not rigid, they were fluid. Everything changed. Nothing was permanent. And that was the beauty of it. You were no longer bound by fear, but by the understanding that change was not something to be resisted, but something to be embraced. As you moved deeper into the forest, the air seemed to thicken, the trees growing taller, their branches twisting in intricate patterns that mirrored the thoughts running through your mind. The wind picked up, rushing through the branches with a sound like whispers, old, ancient whispers, carried on the breeze from places you couldn't yet comprehend. And then, through the twisting branches and dense underbrush, you saw it. A structure. Not the pedestal you had encountered earlier, but something different. A large, sprawling edifice woven from the very trees of the forest itself. The wood seemed to pulse with life, its roots digging deep into the earth, its branches reaching high into the sky. It was both natural and constructed, as though the forest had grown it itself, nurturing it over countless seasons. This was no mere structure. This was a temple, a place of communion, of understanding, a sanctuary where life and death converged. And you knew without question that this was where your next trial would take place. You approached the entrance slowly, the hunger within you pulsing more strongly now, its energy in tune with the forest, in tune with the temple itself. As you stepped through the archway, the air shifted, becoming heavier, more charged. The energy here was different. It was ancient, untouched by time, yet it was familiar, like something that had always been with you, just out of reach, waiting to be discovered. Inside, the temple was dim, the light filtering through the gaps in the bark and leaves above, casting dappled patterns across the stone floor. The walls were etched with symbols, ancient markings that seemed to shift and shimmer in the low light, as though they were alive. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and moss, and the faint sound of running water echoed through the stone halls. At the far end of the temple you saw it, a pool of water, still and reflective. The water shimmered with an ethereal light, the same golden glow you had seen earlier in the forest. It beckoned you, the hunger inside you responding to its call. You moved toward it, your footsteps soft against the stone floor. As you stood before the pool, the reflection in the water shifted. It was no longer just your image that stared back at you. The surface of the water rippled, and as it did, shapes began to form. Figures, faces, scenes of life and death, of creation and destruction, all playing out in the stillness of the water. It was as if the pool was showing you the very essence of the world itself, its cycles, its rhythms, its balance. And then a voice spoke, not the guardian's voice, but something older, something more profound. It was the voice of the forest itself, the voice of the earth, of all things that lived and died. You have come to the pool of reflection, the voice said, its tone both soothing and powerful. Here you will see the path you must walk. The hunger within you will guide you, but it will not define you. What you create must not be born of selfishness, of desire, of want. It must be born of understanding. The balance is fragile, and only those who walk with purpose can maintain it. The water before you shifted again, and this time you saw it clearly, yourself, but not as you were now. The figure in the water was more than just a reflection. It was a future, a possibility, an extension of what you could become. The face was the same, yet different. The eyes glowed with the same golden light you had seen in the temple, and they were filled with knowledge, with purpose. You are a weaver now, the voice continued, a weaver of shadows and light. You will create, but you will also destroy. And with each act, you will shape the world. But remember, you do not walk alone. The hunger is with you, yes, but it is also part of the cycle, part of the forest's pulse. Use it wisely. Guide it. For what you create must be nurtured. What you destroy must be replaced. The vision in the water faded, leaving only your reflection behind. But you knew it had shown you the truth. You were no longer just a traveler. You were a creator, a destroyer, a keeper of the cycle. The hunger had become a part of you, not something to be feared, but something to be understood. You stepped back from the pool, the weight of your purpose settling deep in your chest. You were no longer lost. You had walked the path of hunger, of creation and destruction, and now you understood. The forest had shown you the way. And now it was your turn to walk that path, not just as a force of nature, but as a weaver of the very fabric of the world itself. The cycle was yours to shape. The temple's dim light enveloped you, but as the visions faded, a new clarity took its place, a clarity that burned within your chest, settling into the marrow of your bones. The pool, still and reflective, had shown you something important, something you had always known but never fully understood. You were a weaver, yes, but more than that, you were a keeper of the balance. You held within you the power to shape the world, and with that power came an inescapable responsibility. The hunger that had once threatened to consume you, that deep, insatiable force, now felt like a steady companion. No longer a beast clawing at the edges of your mind, it had become a part of your soul, an integral aspect of the natural world, one that could both give life and take it away. But the voice from the water, the voice of the forest itself, had made it clear. What you create must be nurtured. What you destroy must be replaced. The temple, its ancient stones etched with symbols that seemed to shift with every glance, hummed with an energy that felt timeless. The air was heavy, as though the very weight of the forest, its centuries of life and death, had been absorbed into these walls. Everything in this space felt purposeful, interconnected, like a vast web of existence, stretching from the towering trees outside to the smallest leaf on the forest floor. Everything was connected. You turned from the pool, the reflection of your future still lingering in your mind, and the silence of the temple pressed around you like the hush of the earth itself. Yet, in the silence there was something else, an expectation, a pressure. You could feel the forest waiting for you, not with impatience, but with an unspoken question. What would you do next? The hunger, that deep force within you, seemed to stretch its tendrils out in response. It pulsed beneath your skin, vibrating in harmony with the world around you. The temple, the forest, it was all one. But you were the conduit, the creator, the destroyer, the nurturer. You stepped outside the temple, the cool air of the forest sweeping over you as you emerged into the dim twilight. The trees stood in solemn rows, their trunks reaching up toward the sky, branches thick with the weight of years. The forest was ancient, but it was also ever-changing. New life sprouted at the roots of the old, and old growth fell to make room for the young. The cycle continued, and now you were part of that cycle. The hunger inside you no longer felt like a burden, but a gift, one you could use, one you could mold. But as you stood there in the quiet, your thoughts turned to the question the Guardian had posed to you, the one you had yet to fully answer. What will you create? It was a question that weighed on you, one that resonated deep within your chest. What did it mean to create with purpose? What would you choose to give life to, and what would you choose to let go? The answers did not come easily, but they began to form as you stood there in the stillness of the forest. You knew the path before you was not a simple one. The hunger you carried could shape the world, but it could also tear it apart if left unchecked. There were boundaries to creation, to destruction. And if you were to walk the path you had chosen, you had to learn where those boundaries lay. The trees seemed to whisper around you, their leaves rustling softly in the wind, as though the forest itself was sharing its wisdom. And in that moment it became clear, creation was not about blind force. It was about intention, about knowing when to act and when to step back, when to let life unfold on its own and when to shape it. Destruction was not a mere act of tearing down, but a necessary clearing of space for something new. The balance was delicate, and you had to learn to walk it carefully. You turned your eyes to the forest's edge, where the path before you split into two. One path led deeper into the forest, its shadows thick and mysterious, while the other wound its way toward a distant ridge, where the sky was darkening with the first stirrings of night. Both paths felt important, but you knew you couldn't follow them both. You had to choose. Your heart pulsed with the hunger's steady thrum. It was a call, an urge to move forward, to shape, to create. But as the wind whispered through the trees, you felt the deep, ancient rhythm of the forest itself. There was a purpose to the cycle, a purpose to the choices you would make. The hunger was not an urge to rush. It was a force that required patience, that demanded consideration. And so, you chose the path toward the ridge, toward the vast horizon where the last rays of sunlight were dipping below the tree line. The air grew cooler as you walked, the crunch of the underbrush beneath your feet the only sound breaking the stillness. The hunger inside you still hummed, but its pull was steady, not frantic. It was as though the forest itself had become your guide, urging you to walk at a pace that matched its own. As you neared the ridge, the landscape opened up before you. The forest stretched out below, a sea of green, its depths full of secrets you had yet to uncover. The sky above was a deepening shade of violet, the first stars beginning to twinkle in the gathering dusk. And then you saw it. A figure standing alone at the edge of the ridge, silhouetted against the fading light. At first, you thought it was a part of the forest, a tree perhaps, or a shadow cast by the evening light. But as you drew closer, the figure became clearer. It was humanoid, but not quite human. Its form was wreathed in shadows, its features soft and indistinct, like a dream on the edge of clarity. The figure turned as you approached, its eyes glowing with an inner light, a pale, ethereal glow that seemed to shift with the light of the stars. It spoke, its voice like the rustling of leaves in the wind, soft, yet filled with an undeniable power. "You have come far," the figure said, its words echoing in your mind. "The hunger within you is not just your own. It is part of something greater. The cycle is eternal. But the world you will shape, the world you will create, is yours to mold." The hunger within you stirred in response, a wave of energy flooding your senses. You felt it, felt the connection between yourself and the figure. It was not an enemy. It was not a rival. It was a reflection of the very power you had embraced. The hunger, the creation, the destruction, they were all aspects of the same force. You understood now. The figure extended its hand toward you, palm open. "The forest has given you the key," it said. "Now you must unlock the door." You stepped forward, the hunger within you humming, not in fear but in anticipation. You had learned much, but you knew this was only the beginning. The choices ahead would shape not only your path but the fate of the forest, of the balance itself. With a steady hand, you reached out, your fingers brushing the figure's glowing palm. And in that moment, the forest around you seemed to exhale, a deep, ancient breath, the earth itself responding to the connection you had made. The hunger within you surged, not to consume, but to create. The world, the cycle, the balance, it was all within your grasp. And so, with the figure as your guide, you stepped forward into the unknown, ready to wield the power of creation and destruction with purpose. The path before you was unclear, but the journey had already begun, and you would walk it with the wisdom of the forest in your heart. The figure before you shimmered with an otherworldly glow, its form both solid and ephemeral, as though it existed between the physical world and some deeper, hidden realm. The pale light from its eyes reflected in the darkening sky, casting a haunting glow on the forest below. It held no malice, no fear, only an understanding, an ancient, almost infinite knowledge that felt both familiar and unsettling. It was as though the very essence of the forest itself had taken shape before you, ready to guide you through the next phase of your journey. When you touched its hand, there was no sudden burst of energy, no overwhelming rush of power. Instead, there was a steady, grounding sensation, like the earth itself was whispering its secrets into your soul. It wasn't just the hunger that thrummed within you now, it was the pulse of the entire forest, the rhythm of life and death, creation and destruction, woven into the fabric of existence. You could feel it in your bones, in the air around you, as if the whole world was waiting for your next move. The figure spoke again, its voice like the murmur of the wind through the leaves, calm, patient, but carrying a weight that made every word feel like it had been forged over centuries. "The hunger you carry is but one thread of the tapestry. It is a force of transformation, of change. But what you create is not just for you. It is for the world around you. Every act of creation sends ripples through the cycle. Every life you give birth to, every structure you build, every plant you shape, it will all affect the balance." The words settled over you, sinking deep into your core. The hunger, the power to create, it was not a personal gift, not just an ability to be wielded for your own gain. It was a responsibility. You were not simply shaping the world for yourself. You were shaping it for the forest, for every creature that lived within it, for every spirit that roamed the shadows of its ancient boughs. Your choices mattered, not just to you but to the entire web of life. As the figure spoke, its glowing form seemed to fade in and out, as though it existed in multiple dimensions at once. Its voice echoed in your mind, but the forest around you was alive with its own sounds, the rustling of leaves, the distant calls of birds, the hum of energy that flowed through the earth, the shifting of the trees as if they were watching you. "You are ready now," the figure continued, its voice softer but still filled with an ancient wisdom. "But your journey does not end here. You must now understand the true nature of what you create. You will build, yes. You will shape the world. But you must also know how to protect what you have made. For destruction is as much a part of the cycle as creation. And sometimes what you create must be allowed to fade, to wither, in order for something new to take root. You felt a tremor of understanding deep within you as the figure's words echoed through your mind. You had learned that creation and destruction were not opposites. They were partners, two sides of the same coin. The hunger within you was not a force to be feared or tamed, it was a force to be understood. You had the power to give life, to bring forth new worlds, but you also had the power to take it away. And sometimes, to give birth to something new, something had to be let go. The figure stretched its hand toward the horizon, toward the dense forest that lay beyond the ridge. Beyond these trees, it said, its voice gaining an edge of urgency, lies the heart of the world, the place where all forces converge. It is where creation and destruction meet, where life and death are bound together. But it is not a place for the faint of heart. You must go there if you are to truly understand the cycle and the hunger within you. A sudden surge of energy coursed through you, a sharp, electric pull that seemed to draw you toward the forest's heart. The hunger within you swelled in response, not as an urge to consume, but as a call to action. You understood now that you had to venture deeper into the heart of the forest. Only there, at the source of creation itself, could you truly learn what it meant to wield the power that lay within you. The figure before you began to fade, its form flickering like a dying flame, but its voice remained in your mind. Go to the heart of the world where all forces are woven together. There you will face your greatest test. You will be forced to choose, not just for yourself but for the world you wish to create. And only then will you understand the true purpose of the hunger. With those final words, the figure disappeared completely, leaving only the wind to rustle the leaves around you. The forest, once so quiet, seemed to hum with anticipation as if it too was waiting for you to take the next step. The path ahead was clear, but the weight of your decision settled heavily on your shoulders. You could feel the pull of the forest, the deep, unspoken invitation to venture further, deeper into its heart. The hunger inside you swirled with excitement, but also with an unsettling sense of purpose. What lay ahead would test not just your strength, but your understanding of creation itself. The journey toward the heart of the world would not be an easy one. The path was long, winding, and treacherous. The forest here was different from the dense woods you had known. The trees were taller, their bark darker, their shadows deeper. The air grew thick with a strange energy, like the very land itself was alive, watching, waiting for you to arrive. As you pressed forward, the wind picked up, carrying with it the scent of earth and rain. The forest, despite its stillness, was teeming with life. Hidden creatures, unseen forces, all moving in harmony with the world around you. You could feel the hunger inside you, but now it was tempered with something else. A deeper understanding, a patience, a quiet knowing that you had not had before. The trees seemed to close in around you, their trunks twisting together like ancient hands, guiding you deeper into the unknown. Every step you took, you felt the pull of the cycle, creation, destruction, life, death, woven together in a delicate balance. The further you ventured, the more the forest seemed to come alive. The leaves above rustled in the wind, and the ground beneath your feet seemed to shift with every step you took, as if the very earth was shifting, responding to your presence. And then, just as the shadows deepened and the air grew heavier with anticipation, you reached it, the heart of the world. The clearing before you was vast, stretching out into a limitless horizon. The trees here were ancient, their trunks twisted and gnarled, their roots sprawling deep into the earth, connecting with each other in an intricate web that seemed to stretch out forever. The ground was soft, and the air was thick with the scent of damp earth and rain. In the center of the clearing stood an enormous, glowing tree, its bark shimmering with an ethereal light, its roots glowing like veins beneath the earth. This was it, the heart of creation, the source of everything, the balance of life, death, creation, and destruction. The hunger within you flared, not in desperation, but in recognition. This was the source of your power, the force that had shaped you, the force that had driven you to this moment. The tree, the heart of the world, was the point of convergence for all the forces you had learned to wield. But as you approached the glowing tree, you felt a presence, one that was older, more powerful than anything you had encountered before. It was a force of nature, pure and unyielding. The air around you thickened, the wind stilling as the earth seemed to hold its breath. From the depths of the tree, a voice emerged. It was deep, resonant, like the thunder that precedes a storm. "You have come far," it said, its voice carrying a weight of ages. "But you must prove yourself worthy. To wield the hunger, to shape the world, you must first understand the balance. You must understand what it means to create and what it means to destroy. Only then will you become the true weaver of worlds." And with those words, the heart of the world began to pulse, its light intensifying, flooding the clearing with an almost blinding radiance. The hunger within you roared in response, eager but patient. It was time. Time to face the test that would decide everything. You stepped forward, ready to embrace the challenge. The heart of the world pulsed before you like a living heartbeat, its light illuminating the vast clearing with an intensity that seemed to erase the very shadows of the forest. The ancient tree at the center of it all glowed with a radiance so pure, so consuming, it felt as though it had absorbed the light of the stars themselves. Its roots spread like a vast network beneath the earth, connecting the land in ways that transcended mere soil and stone, an intricate web of life that pulsed with unseen energy. As you stood before it, the air itself seemed to change, becoming thicker, heavier, as though the very atmosphere was aware of the test you were about to face. The hunger within you stirred, not in a frantic or desperate way, but in a quiet, controlled thrum, a recognition of the importance of this moment. This was the culmination of everything you had experienced, the journey through the forest, the lessons you had learned, the power you had come to understand. This was the moment when your role in the cycle would be defined. The power to create and destroy lay in your hands, but what would you choose to do with it? The voice that had spoken from within the tree echoed through the clearing, deep and rumbling like thunder that vibrated through the very core of the earth. To stand before the heart of the world is to face the true nature of the cycle. Creation and destruction are but two sides of the same force. What you choose now will determine not only your fate but the fate of all that lives and dies. The balance must be maintained or all will be lost. The words settled into you, weaving themselves into the very fabric of your understanding. The hunger, the force of creation that had grown within you, was not a tool to be used lightly. It was a force that could sustain life, but it could also tear apart the world if wielded carelessly. You understood now that every choice you made was a thread in the tapestry of existence, each one pulling at the fabric of life, shifting the delicate equilibrium that held the world together. You must prove yourself worthy, the voice continued, its tone resonating with an ancient wisdom that seemed to stretch beyond time itself. To wield the hunger is to understand it, to give it purpose. The world is not for you to command, but for you to shape in harmony with the cycle. Creation without destruction is meaningless. Destruction without creation is empty. The balance is not yours to break. The hunger within you stirred again, but this time it felt different. It was not a call to power, but a challenge. An invitation to truly understand the world, to shape it with intention and care, to honor the natural order of life and death. You stepped forward, your heart beating in time with the pulsing light of the heart of the world. The tree's glowing bark seemed to shimmer with each beat as though it, too, was alive with the energy of the universe. You could feel it now, the deep connection between yourself and the forest, between creation and destruction. You were part of the cycle. You had always been. The hunger, the power to shape life, to mold the world into something new, was a force that flowed through you, through the very earth, the trees, the sky. The ancient voice spoke again, this time softer, as though it were guiding you through the steps you must take. In the heart of the world, you will face the choice. The hunger you carry will reveal itself. You will choose whether to create or to destroy. The consequences of your decision will ripple through the fabric of the cycle. Choose wisely, for the world depends on it. The air around you grew heavy with anticipation, the very forest holding its breath as if awaiting your response. The hunger thrummed within you, but it was not frantic. It was waiting, patient, like a river at rest, ready to flow when you chose to release it. And yet, there was something more in its depth now, an awareness. It was no longer a force you were simply controlling. It was something you were becoming one with, something that had always existed and always would. You closed your eyes and took a deep breath. The moment had come. The cycle, the dance between creation and destruction, was not a conflict to be fought. It was a balance to be understood. You had learned this over the course of your journey. Creation, the hunger that had once consumed you, was not an end. It was a beginning. Destruction was not an erasure. It was a necessary clearing, a space for the new to take root. The choice was yours to make. The question was not about whether you would create or destroy. The question was how you would weave them together. Slowly, you opened your eyes, and before you, the glowing tree shimmered like a constellation come to earth, its branches stretching toward the sky, reaching out to the stars, and its roots burrowing deep into the earth, intertwining with the pulse of the world itself. With a steady breath, you reached out, extending your hand toward the heart of the tree, toward the force that had guided you to this moment. As your fingers brushed against the glowing bark, a surge of energy flooded through you, a deep, ancient energy that felt like the soul of the world itself, a living, breathing entity that was both part of you and greater than you. The hunger within you flared, but this time, it did not consume. It surged with purpose, with intention. You felt the raw power of creation, the potential to shape the world, to give life to new things, to bring forth the unknown. But there was also something else, something just as powerful, just as necessary, the understanding of destruction, of clearing the old to make space for the new. And in that moment you understood. You were not meant to create or destroy in isolation. You were meant to weave. Creation and destruction were threads in the same tapestry, each one equally necessary. They were not opposing forces but complementary ones. Creation brought forth life, but destruction made room for it to flourish. And without destruction, creation would stagnate, would wither in the weight of its own existence. Without creation, destruction would have no purpose. The cycle would cease. The hunger within you steadied, finding its place in the grand scheme of things. It was not a power to wield carelessly, but a force to respect, to guide, to mold with wisdom. You were not just a creator. You were a weaver of worlds, a force of balance, a keeper of the cycle. And the world, this world, the forest, the land, the sky, all that lived and died, was yours to shape, but only if you walked the path with understanding. As the energy from the tree flowed through you, you felt the connections, threads of light weaving through the very fabric of existence. You could feel the lives of creatures far and wide, the ebb and flow of nature, the quiet pulse of the earth beneath you. It was all part of a larger design, one that you were now a part of, one that you had always been a part of. The hunger inside you was no longer a chaotic force, but a steady, guiding pulse, aligned with the rhythm of life itself. The world was not yours to command, but to guide, to protect, to shape with purpose. And with that understanding, the figure of the heart of the world, the ancient tree, seemed to smile in its own way, a subtle shift in its glowing form, a deep, knowing nod. "You are ready," the voice whispered, its tone filled with both pride and acceptance. "You are the weaver now. Go forth and shape the world with purpose." And as the light of the tree faded into the twilight of the forest, you knew that your journey was just beginning. You were no longer just a wanderer in the woods, a seeker of power. You were the keeper of the balance, the weaver of worlds, the one who would guide the hunger with wisdom, and bring forth new life from the ashes of what once was. The cycle would continue. And now you were its thread. The twilight deepened as the last of the light from the glowing tree receded into the vastness of the forest. The clearing was once again bathed in shadows, the air still thick with the pulse of ancient energy. The forest felt more alive than ever, its presence surrounding you like a living, breathing entity, waiting for you to step forward. The winds, which had once been still, began to stir again, but this time they carried with them something different, an invitation. You stood there for a moment, your hand still tingling from where it had touched the heart of the tree, feeling the deep connection between yourself and the very essence of the world. You were part of it now, part of the cycle, a force woven into the great tapestry of creation and destruction. The hunger within you, once an uncontrollable, gnawing beast, now thrummed in harmony with the forest, a steady rhythm that echoed the pulse of the earth itself. As you breathed in the air, it felt like you were breathing in more than just the atmosphere. You were breathing in the pulse of life. Every living creature, every blade of grass, every leaf on every tree. You could feel their presence, their life force, woven into the very fabric of existence. You could feel their thoughts, their desires, their struggles, as if they were threads of the same cloth, each one intricately connected to the others. The knowledge you had gained, the understanding that creation and destruction were inseparable, flowed through you like an endless stream. You were no longer just a passive observer of the world, you were a participant, a weaver of fate. Every action you took, every choice you made sent ripples through the cycle. What you created would shape the future, and what you destroyed would make room for something new. The hunger within you no longer felt like a wild force to be tamed. It was a part of you, yes, but also a part of everything else. The trees, the animals, the wind, the very earth beneath your feet. It was the force that drove the cycle forward, the thing that kept everything in motion. But it was not just destruction. It was transformation. Every death led to rebirth, every end led to a new beginning. The forest was constantly changing, constantly evolving, and you were now a part of that evolution. You took a step forward, your heart heavy with the weight of your new purpose. The path ahead of you was not clear, but you knew where it would lead. The forest had shown you that the hunger you carried was not a burden. It was a tool, one that could be used to create and to destroy with intention, with wisdom. The balance could be maintained, but only if you understood its delicate nature. As you moved deeper into the forest, the trees grew thicker, their trunks twisting and spiraling toward the sky. The air grew cooler, the shadows longer, and the distant sounds of the forest grew quieter. It was as though the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting for you to decide your next move. You could feel the pulse of the world around you, the hum of life coursing through the land, and yet there was something different now, something off. It was subtle at first, just a whisper at the edge of your consciousness. But as you pressed forward, the feeling intensified. It was as though the very air around you had changed. The once familiar rustling of leaves now felt more like a low murmur, as though the trees were speaking to each other in hushed tones. And then the wind shifted, carrying with it an unfamiliar scent, one that was thick and dark, like something ancient and forgotten had begun to stir in the depths of the forest. You stopped in your tracks, the hairs on the back of your neck standing on end. The hunger within you stirred, but not with the usual calm purpose. It was a sharp, sudden jolt, a flare of primal instinct like the beginning of a storm. The balance you had worked so hard to understand now felt fragile, as though something was threatening to disrupt it. Something dark. The forest had always felt alive, but this felt different. There was a disturbance in the natural order, a shift in the energy that hummed beneath the surface of the earth. The cycle was still there, still moving, but something was out of sync. Something was wrong. A crackling noise broke the silence, coming from deeper within the forest. The sound was strange, unfamiliar, a sharp, unnatural sound that made your heart race. You took a cautious step forward, and then another, the hunger within you now buzzing with urgency. There was a deep, gnawing sensation, as though the very essence of the forest was calling to you, but not in the way it had before. This was not a request. This was a warning. As you moved closer to the source of the disturbance, the trees began to thin, and the forest floor gave way to rocky ground. You could feel it now, the weight of the air, the oppressive silence that had fallen over the land. The trees here were twisted and gnarled, their branches reaching out like fingers, their bark cracked and scorched. The very earth seemed to be scarred, as if something had ripped through it and left a mark that would never fade. At the center of the clearing you saw it, a tear in the fabric of the world, a rift. The ground around it was scorched, the trees bent and twisted as though they had been scorched by a great heat. The tear itself was a jagged line, glowing faintly with an eerie, sickly green light. It seemed to pulse like the beating of a heart, but there was no rhythm, no harmony. It was chaotic, unbalanced, a rip in the very cycle you had come to understand. The hunger inside you surged, a deep, resonant call that matched the rift's pulse. But this time it was not a call to creation. It was a call to destroy. The rift was something unnatural, something that didn't belong. It was an aberration, a fracture in the world's delicate balance. And yet, you knew that destruction alone would not be enough. This was not a force to be simply wiped away. The rift had been created for a reason, and the forces that had summoned it would not allow it to be erased so easily. You could feel it deep within your soul. The rift was not just a wound in the world. It was a challenge. The forest was speaking to you again, its voice softer now, but insistent. The balance could be restored, but it would not be easy. To close the rift, you would have to act quickly, but with purpose. The hunger you carried, the hunger you had learned to control, would be necessary. But it would need to be guided, shaped into a force that could heal, not just destroy. You would have to weave your knowledge of creation and destruction together, using them both to mend what had been torn apart. The rift pulsed again, its green light growing brighter, more intense. The wind around you began to howl, and the trees groaned as though they too were afraid of what was to come. The hunger inside you surged again, but this time you focused it, not on destruction but on repair. The world was fractured, but it was not beyond saving. You could restore it if you acted with care, with intention. You took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the world on your shoulders. The rift before you was a test, not just of your power but of your understanding of the cycle. This was not about wielding the hunger recklessly. It was about weaving the forces together, creation and destruction, light and shadow, and using them to restore the balance. As you stepped forward, your heart steady and your purpose clear, you reached out toward the rift. The hunger thrummed beneath your skin, but it was no longer a wild, chaotic force. It was a tool, a thread that would weave the rift back together, if only you could guide it with the wisdom you had learned. The air around you crackled with energy as you focused on the rift, letting the hunger flow through you, shaping it into something new. You were no longer just a creator or destroyer. You were a weaver of worlds, a keeper of the balance. And now you would repair the fabric of existence itself. The rift resisted, but you persisted, feeling the hunger surge with a renewed purpose. The pulse of creation and destruction intertwined, weaving through the tear, stitching it back together. Slowly but surely the green light began to fade, replaced by the steady, grounding rhythm of the world itself. And as the rift closed, you felt the hunger within you settle into a deep, contented hum. The cycle had been restored. The balance had been mended. The forest around you seemed to sigh in relief, its energy returning to a natural rhythm. But the forest had shown you something else in this moment, the true nature of your power. You were not merely a force of creation or destruction. You were a weaver, a keeper of the threads of fate, the one who would guide the world's tapestry with wisdom, understanding, and care. The journey was far from over. But for now, the balance had been restored, and you knew that you were ready for whatever challenge lay ahead. The rift had closed, but the echoes of its presence lingered in the air, a faint hum like a distant memory of a storm that had passed. The forest, once again calm, seemed to breathe with a new rhythm, the air fresher, the shadows softer. You stood in the clearing, the weight of the world settling gently around you. The hunger within you, though still present, was no longer a consuming force. It was a steady pulse, a whisper in the back of your mind, a reminder of the delicate balance that you now carried within yourself. The path ahead was uncertain, but you had learned something vital in this moment, something that would shape your every step from here on out. The hunger was not a force to be feared or ignored. It was a part of you, yes, but it was also part of everything. The trees, the sky, the very earth beneath your feet, it was all connected. You were no longer just a weaver of your own fate. You were a weaver of the universe's fate. The energy that had surged through you in the moments before the rift closed was still alive within you, but now it felt like a force of balance, a guiding hand rather than a driving urge. Creation and destruction, life and death, they were not opposites, but two aspects of the same force. They were intertwined, inseparable, and both necessary. The forest had shown you this truth, had taught you that the world you sought to shape was not a blank canvas to be filled with your desires, but a living, breathing entity that required your understanding, your respect, and your care. The hunger within you now felt like a tool, an instrument you could wield with wisdom. It was not something to be used recklessly, but something to be guided, shaped, and directed toward a greater purpose. You were the weaver of this world, the keeper of the cycle. And the world was full of threads of life, threads of death, threads of possibility. Each one was connected, woven into the tapestry of existence, and your choices would determine how they intertwined. You took a deep breath, the cool air filling your lungs. The clearing was quiet now, save for the faint rustling of the trees, the soft chirping of unseen creatures. The forest had returned to its natural state, but something within you had shifted. You were not just a traveler here anymore. You were part of the forest, part of the cycle, part of the loom that wove the very fabric of existence. The voice of the ancient tree, the one that had guided you through the trials of the heart of the world, echoed in your mind once more. It was softer now, but still filled with the same timeless wisdom. You have closed the rift and restored the balance, the voice said. But your journey does not end here. There are other forces at work, other threads that need to be woven into the fabric of the world. The hunger you carry is not just a force of destruction, but of creation, and you must learn to wield it with the care and understanding it deserves. The hunger thrummed inside you, a deep, steady pulse, but it was no longer a force that controlled you. You were its master now, its guide, its keeper. You could feel its presence in everything, the trees, the earth, the stars above. It was in the rhythm of the forest, the rustle of leaves, the flow of rivers, the growth of plants. It was the pulse of life itself, and you were one with it. The voice continued, its tone gentle but insistent. You must seek out the threads that remain loose, the ones that are still unraveling. There are places in the world where the balance is fragile, where the cycle is threatened. You will find them and you will restore them. You will weave the threads back into place, guiding the forces of creation and destruction with purpose and wisdom. The hunger within you is not just a power. It is a responsibility. The cycle must be preserved, and you are its keeper. You nodded, understanding now what you must do. The forest had shown you that the hunger you carried was not just your own. It was a force of nature, a part of the world, and you were its steward. It was not just about creation or destruction. It was about weaving the threads of fate with care, understanding, and balance. The path before you was still unclear, but you now knew that your journey would be one of constant vigilance. The world was full of imbalances, places where the cycle had been disturbed, where the threads of life had begun to unravel. You would find these places and you would restore the balance, using the hunger within you to guide the forces of creation and destruction in harmony. The stars above began to twinkle more brightly, their light reflecting off the trees and casting long shadows across the clearing. It was as though the entire forest was alive, watching, waiting for you to take the next step. You could feel its presence, its energy all around you, as if the very land itself was alive with potential, ready to be shaped by your hands. But the forest also held its secrets. There were places where the threads of fate had been broken, where the balance had been disrupted in ways you could not yet understand. These places called to you, their energy reaching out, pulling you toward them. And so, with a deep breath, you set off into the night, the hunger within you humming with purpose. As you walked through the forest, the trees seemed to lean toward you, their branches whispering in the wind. The path ahead was long, but you knew now that you were not walking it alone. The forest was with you, its pulse echoing through your own. You were a part of it, and it was a part of you. The world, the cycle, the hunger, it was all connected, a vast, intricate tapestry that you were now bound to. The moon rose higher in the sky, casting its silver light across the forest floor. The hunger within you grew steady, a rhythmic pulse that beat in time with the forest's own heartbeat. You could feel the threads of the world all around you, their energy flowing like a river, winding through the trees, through the land, through the very air. As you moved deeper into the forest, you knew that you were not simply wandering through it. You were listening to it, feeling its pulse, understanding its rhythms. You were a weaver now, and the threads of the world were yours to shape. The hunger within you would guide you, but it would not control you. You were its master, and with that power came a great responsibility. The forest ahead seemed to grow darker, the trees growing denser, their branches intertwining overhead to form a canopy of shadows. But the hunger within you did not falter. It thrummed with purpose, its pulse steady, calm. You were ready. The path ahead was long, and the challenges that lay before you were unknown, but you now understood that your journey was not just about restoring balance. It was about weaving the world together, thread by thread, with wisdom and care. The hunger would be your guide, but you would not allow it to consume you. You were the weaver of the cycle, the keeper of the balance, and the world was yours to shape. And so, with each step you took, the forest embraced you. The stars above, the earth beneath your feet, the trees around you, they were all part of the same great tapestry. And you, the weaver, were ready to continue the work that had been set before you, to restore the threads, to guide the hunger, and to shape the world with purpose. The forest, alive with the quiet rhythm of its ancient heart, seemed to respond to your every step. The shadows shifted around you, the trees bending as if acknowledging your presence, their branches whispering in the wind. The path ahead, though shrouded in mystery, felt less like an uncertain journey and more like an intricate weaving. Each step you took added to the growing pattern of the world, the threads of life and death, creation and destruction, all intricately intertwined. The hunger within you, once wild and uncontrollable, had become a steady, pulsing force. It no longer clawed at you with an insatiable desire, but hummed with quiet understanding, resonating with the deeper rhythms of the world. It was no longer something you fought, but something you guided, a tool, a partner in the work of weaving the very fabric of existence. You were not merely a creator, nor just a destroyer. You were the weaver of life, the one who shaped the threads with intention, who knew when to nurture, when to prune, and when to let things fade. The deeper into the forest you traveled, the more you sensed its presence. It was not just the trees that spoke now. It was the earth, the stones beneath your feet, the wind in the leaves, the birds in the air. The forest was alive, not just in the physical sense, but in a deeper, more primal way. It was conscious, aware of your journey, aware of your purpose. You were not a stranger here. You were a part of it just as the trees and the animals were. You could feel their thoughts and their whispers, the hidden language of the forest flowing through your mind like an ancient river. The forest had always been a place of balance, life and death, creation and decay, light and shadow, all existing in a delicate harmony. But now, with your presence, that balance had shifted. You had become a bridge between the two realms, between life and death, creation and destruction, and the world was waiting for you to fulfill your role. The hunger thrummed again deep within you. It had led you here, and it was now guiding you towards something deeper, something hidden within the forest. You could feel it like a magnetic pull, an energy that beckoned you forward deeper into the heart of the woods, to a place where the cycle of life and death was most pronounced, where the threads of the world were at their most fragile. And then, as you walked, you saw it. In the distance, through the trees, you could make out a faint glow, a soft, golden light that flickered like a distant fire. The hunger within you surged, not with a frantic rush, but with a knowing anticipation. This was the source, the heart of the forest, where the cycle had begun, and where it would one day end. This was where you would face the true nature of the hunger within you, where you would learn to wield it in its purest form. You quickened your pace, your footsteps light but determined, guided by the pull of the light ahead. The forest seemed to open up before you, the trees parting as though they were making way for your arrival. The air grew warmer, and the faint scent of jasmine and pine filled your senses, a fragrance so intoxicating, so familiar, it felt like home. As you neared the glowing light, the trees became thicker, their trunks twisted and knotted, their branches heavy with moss. The ground beneath your feet was soft, almost spongy, like the earth itself was alive, breathing with you. The hunger within you pulsed in time with the rhythm of the forest, a deep, resonant hum that seemed to echo from the earth itself. And then you reached it. The clearing before you was bathed in a golden light, the source of which seemed to come from the very ground itself. The air was thick with magic, the energy crackling in the atmosphere. At the center of the clearing stood a massive ancient tree, its trunk wide and gnarled, its branches sprawling out in all directions, covered in thick layers of ivy and moss. Its roots reached deep into the earth, intertwining with the very fabric of the land, pulling energy from the core of the world itself. The tree was not just a tree, it was the embodiment of life, of creation itself. Its bark shimmered with a faint, ethereal glow, and as you approached, you felt the pulse of the forest intensify, as though the entire world was holding its breath, waiting for you to make your next move. The hunger within you flared again, but this time it was different. It was no longer a chaotic force, but a calm, steady rhythm that resonated with the tree's ancient energy. You were no longer fighting against it. You were in tune with it, a part of it. The energy that had once felt like a firestorm was now a gentle breeze, a stream of power that you could channel and shape with purpose. You stepped closer to the tree, the air around you humming with an electric charge. As you reached out to touch its bark, a sudden surge of energy shot through you like a lightning strike. The hunger within you surged in response, but this time you didn't fight it. You let it flow, let it merge with the tree's energy, becoming one with it. The world seemed to shift around you, the stars above flickering in time with the pulse of the forest. And then you saw it, the loom. It wasn't a physical object, but a presence, an invisible web that stretched across the entire forest, across the entire world. It was the pattern of life, the threads that connected everything, every living creature, every tree, every rock, every breath of wind. The loom was the foundation of existence, the framework upon which the world was built. And you, the weaver, were part of it. The hunger within you surged, but this time, it wasn't a force of destruction. It was a force of creation, of shaping the threads of fate with purpose and intention. You felt the power coursing through you, the ability to weave and unravel the threads, to create and destroy, to guide the world toward balance. But with this power came a great responsibility. The loom was fragile, delicate. One wrong move, one careless pull, and the threads could unravel, the balance could be destroyed. Creation and destruction were not forces to be wielded lightly. They were threads that had to be woven with care, with understanding, with respect. You closed your eyes, feeling the weight of the loom, feeling the power within you. The hunger was no longer a burden. It was a gift, a responsibility. And as the tree's energy flowed through you, you understood your role. You were the weaver. You were the one who would guide the threads of life, who would shape the world with intention, with wisdom. The hunger within you steadied, its pulse becoming one with the pulse of the forest, the pulse of the world. And in that moment you knew what had to be done. The cycle of life and death, creation and destruction, was never ending, but you were its keeper. You would restore the balance, guide the threads of fate, and weave the world together, one thread at a time. The journey was far from over, but now you understood your purpose. You were the weaver, and the loom of life was yours to shape.